All right, I will call to order this meeting of the Easthampton Planning Board for Tuesday, January 15th, 2019. Is there anybody here who has anything to speak about that is not on the agenda for tonight? All right, moving right along. The planning board minutes, no ANRs, right, Jeff?
Correct.
Okay, so move on to the continued public hearing for the Verb is Herb LLC, seeking a special permit to operate an adult use cannabis retailer establishment. That's 74 Cottage Street. Oh, yeah, and just as a note, so on the agenda, the second item, River Valley Co-op, is on for 6:15. That's really to reflect that it's gonna go second. It's not gonna likely start at 6:15. So just so everyone knows, you may have a little bit of a show to watch first. So apologies, but there's no real way to plan these in specific time slots. So is there somebody here to speak to the Verb is Herb? All right.
Hi, my name is Bill Hart. Is this on?
Speak close.
My name is Bill Hartley, and I am the owner of the Verb is Herb, and we are planning an adult cannabis shop at 74 Cottage Street in Easthampton, Massachusetts. And this is the second time we've been in front of the board for the special permit. So before I get started, though, I did want to thank the planning board because I know you guys volunteer, and it's really amazing the amount of time that you put into this. I'd also like to thank the police department, especially Chief Alberti, who has met with us a couple of times, and I've talked with him on the phone, and we've emailed each other, and the fire department. I'd like to thank Brian, our security expert, and Steve, the consultant, who is great, actually. And I also want to thank Jeff for helping us to clarify some of the issues that we need to go over in this meeting. He helped us to sort of, we had a list, and then he had a list, and we compared the two, and get a few things on there that I didn't have, so thank you. I would ask that Steve, who's developed most of these plans, get up here and talk about the plan, some of the questions that are on this, that the board brought up last time. So, Steve, thank you.
Thank you for hearing us tonight. Is there a place you guys want to start, or?
Well, so there was a pretty extensive supplemental package that was submitted in response to some of the issues that came up last time. So maybe if you could start by just walking through some of those materials, that'd be helpful.
Sure. So number one there is the board was looking for our waste disposal and where the dumpsters and the parking would be. So as of right now, we're going to use the area directly behind the Cottage Street kind of complex right there. There's an area where there's 3 to 4 dumpsters out there right now for the various businesses. We will utilize those. We will contract with an approved waste disposal and recycling. You can see there in the picture. So there's currently 3 to 4 dumpsters back there now. That is going to be for our normal refuse. It's not going to be any marijuana products, no marijuana waste, no regulated products will go there. So just if we were opening up a t-shirt shop, that's where our garbage would go. We've identified the one parking space directly behind our back door. That's the one that's going to be dedicated for us to use for parking and for deliveries. And that's what we have right now.
Are the rest of those spots already reserved or assigned to specific tenants in those buildings?
Sure.
So there are 7 spots specifically for the public that are assigned to tenants. Theoretically, I should have access to 2 of those spots, but he couldn't tell me which ones, so we didn't really put it on here.
Okay, and are you planning on using those for employees, or are those going to be, you'll have at least 2 spots sort of dedicated to customers, or?
I would think they would be dedicated to customers. I'm going to ask employees to park away from the premises.
Okay, and there'll be signage, in theory, identifying them as reserved for Verb is Herb, or?
Not clear if I can do that. I've tried to talk with the landlord about which spots I could put the signage on.
Okay.
I'm not clear about that at this time.
Okay.
You have that one parking spot there that's designated for you for deliveries?
Yes.
Is that going to be strictly for deliveries?
I would say myself or a manager would park there when there were not
And if there
deliveries.
are deliveries, they would let you know and you
Yes.
would have to move?
Yes. Yep.
Any questions right off on the dumpster location or parking?
That's good.
We submitted updated floor plans for the establishment. And these are based on occupancy. We wanted to maximize the occupancy that we could have on the sales floor. I know queuing is an issue, and we're gonna get into that a little bit, but our redesign here is gonna allow the most amount of customers into the facility. We took out the office that was located in the previous plan. We put that downstairs. We did keep the ADA bathroom. It's gonna be for employees. We spoke with our architect. He did some research. We do have to offer the restrooms for our employees, so the new ADA bathroom will stay there.
I have a question about the numbers that you have here. So you have 49 people occupancy, which allows you then to not have a bathroom for customers.
Correct.
So you're saying the person trap at the very bottom of this drawing, where people enter in, has enough space for 15 customers and 1 employee. So that employee is, from reading through your opening plan, I was confused whether the employee in that space is the person that is checking the IDs, or is it the person at the counter, the second person that's checking IDs?
So it's gonna be the employee in there physically checking IDs.
In
So-
that space?
In the waiting area?
Correct.
Okay.
And
So
but then
those
that's,
numbers came from us out of that 49 occupancy. The square footage there, the facility allows for the 49. It actually allows for more.
Yeah.
But our use, 9. So standing room only, we feel we could, in theory, have that many people in there. I don't think we're gonna get to that many times, you know, if at all. But that's where we delineated the waiting room and the amount of people we felt would be the maximum for customers in the retail area.
And that's not including any security person that might be there, necessary there at,
That would be
during
an
the opening?
employee, that would be one of the employees with us. So if we hired, especially during the opening, if we're gonna have supplemental security, we would have one outside, and the other one would be that person in the person trap there. That window that remains in there is for our low, when there's not a lot of customers, people can come in, ring a bell. Either the person would come out and open the door, and then they can pass the ID through there to be checked. But we think, you know, we're gonna have that person in that area checking the IDs, putting it through the scanner, you know, during business hours.
what, I'm curious what makes you think that you're unlikely to ever have 15 people waiting to come in?
On top of the number we have in the
Yeah, so I mean, it's,
sales area.
it's, you got 24 in the sales area, right?
Correct,
And then 15 waiting?
correct.
And it doesn't, I mean, obviously this is all sort of uncharted territory, but what we've seen at other places, that doesn't seem, like, I wouldn't be shocked to find out that there's 50 people that show up in a 10-minute window at some point during a weekend day.
That could happen. We do think our parking is gonna limit the amount of customers that we have, the availability of parking in that area. Now, I know there are festivals, there are those summertime days when the downtown gets packed, and we may approach that, but we don't think it's gonna be a common occurrence if, we would rather tell our people, you know, or tell our customers through social media or through our website that, you know, yes, we have a long wait, you know, and have them go other places and then come back. You know, I don't think we're gonna, by the time we open, there's gonna be a handful of retailers open, at least one here, possibly 2, Northampton, Holyoke. So we think what we've seen in the other communities is gonna die down, and we're not gonna have that mad rush or that novelty as much. Obviously, when we first open, we feel we're gonna be there and we're gonna be well prepared for it.
And then in the sales area, you have 24 customers and 2 employees. That seems to me chaotic. How are you gonna organize those 24 customers so they're not all on those 2 people?
So we have 2 people on the sales floor, but we're also gonna have the 5 or 6 people behind the POS station. So those 2 people on the sales floor are just gonna manage, answer questions, you know, talk about products, try to give a prep to the customers while they're in there. And they're just more management of the people on the outside of the POS, and then we'll have our POS or our sales associates behind there. We are going to offer a expedited line where people who already know what they want to come in, they're going to go up, make their purchase and leave. And we can also do ordering online, where if somebody says, you know, I want these products, have them queued up for me, they're going to come in, and that purchase is going to, you know, go quicker.
Okay, so the 6 or 7 employees, depending upon which area you look in this package, that are in the business and storage area, those are the people behind the registers at the point of sale,
Right.
helping them pick and purchase the product. Okay, thank you.
Can you just sort of, I mean, how is that queuing area gonna be organized? I mean, are you gonna go up on the right-hand side? Are you gonna have a line? Are you gonna have roped off area?
It's gonna be a roped off area, just like, I don't know if anybody's been in it, so they're gonna have the roped off area. We'll call up the next customer to come up, look at the products, look at our menus, and then walk them down, once they've chosen what they want, walk them down to the POS station, do the transaction, and then they'll be roped off coming out the left side of the building there.
So the POS is up at the top, those are
That's correct.
like, okay. So the idea is we'll walk people, is the product on the right,
Product
on
is
those
the right.
counters there? Is that a display
The
counter?
samples, yeah, that's a display counter.
Okay, so people will be standing in front of the display counters already? That's where the line's gonna be?
The queuing will begin. If we have enough room, yeah, we'll use the roped off area and maybe create a serpentine. You know, that hasn't been fine tuned yet.
I'm just trying to think, I mean, you're envisioning having 24 people in that area, so I'm trying to think of how you're gonna line them up in a way where they're coming in an orderly fashion, they're still able to see the display cases, they get to the sale and then come out the other side.
Again, you know, I rarely, I think we're gonna get up to that 24 people. You know, quite honestly, we don't want that many people in our sales area, but we wanna keep people off the street also. We don't wanna be queuing outside, so we tried to maximize the amount we could have inside. We don't wanna be a nuisance to the neighbors or anything else like that, so.
What's the plan when you're overwhelmed? What's the plan when you have more than all that? And they're starting to line up out the door, what do you do?
We're not gonna, you know, we have our occupancy, we're not gonna let them in. I'm hoping we can plan for that through the information we give out to the people through social media. and
Are
through-
appointments an option?
Absolutely. In our opening plan, reservations are an option. And if there are too many customers, you know, we have several options, one of which would be kind of like a restaurant reservation, where they come up and there's a line, they don't want to sit there, we'll take their cell phone.
But you're not mandating appointments.
We're not mandating right now. In our opening plan, we have outlined a lot of ways that we can mitigate the outside queuing of people, and we're going to work with the city. We think it's going to be a fluid plan, especially right now where it's you know, months away. As that time gets closer, we will work with the city, take the recommendations of the city, the planning board, the police department, more importantly, and implement those. So, you know, we're going to do whatever it takes to minimize the impact of.
When you came before us last, I think it was 9 people in that outer little waiting area, and by removing the bathroom, we're up to 15 now, that's the difference, am I wrong in that?
We weren't positive on the 9. We still, that was one of the questions that we wanted to find out the occupancy and where we could put them.
But 15 you feel solid and comfortable with is sort of the outer number in the waiting area now?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, you're gonna have 24 people in there with 1 employee. Now, are you gonna wait until all 24 are gone before you let in another 24?
No, you know, as people
Or
leave. we
as
would
the
introduce
line
more
goes
people in
down,
there.
you're gonna let people? Who's going to say, all right, we had 3 people go, who's gonna let 3 more people in?
That's gonna be our security officer in the front, or our agent in the front. He's the one that's checking IDs. He's the one that's gonna control who comes in the building, first of all, and then who goes into the sales floor from the person trap.
So they're already going to be ID'd in that before they get to that.
That's correct, and they're also ID'd at the point of sale also, again, and, you know, as a, you know, redundant safety.
So you mentioned some of the options that you had given as far as the queuing and the lack of parking, that kind of stuff. I think that a lot of those seem like good tools. I don't think that, based on the way we've handled them, and especially with this site, I don't think we can sort of let you go with those at your disposal. I think we're gonna have to do like a concrete opening plan. And I think the way we did it, for example, with INSA is, you go, I think in that case, we had a 3-month window where you're gonna do this intensive traffic details, they retained other parking, that sort of stuff, and then come back and see where they are. We'll talk to the police, talk to the DPW, talk to everyone. It may be a different time frame that we're talking about for you, just because they're at the forefront of all this
Sure.
time-wise. So, but I think that we're gonna have to, at some point, whether it's tonight or whether it's at another meeting, come together with like an actual detailed plan,
Definitive plan,
where
yeah.
after you open, you'll come back and we'll say, boy, this reservation system is going great, but it seems like people have, not been swapping the store, so maybe we can do away with that now, or something like that. I think that we should be thinking about.
I think that was our plan also.
Okay.
And we talked about the conditions of plan approval through the city during this opening period, and revisiting it, 4 weeks, 6 weeks,
Yeah,
12
whatever
weeks
those
later.
time periods are. I think that makes the most sense to sort of assume the worst, but make it a flexible plan where we can come back in, even without having to, have you file to modify a special permit, just that you will be coming back at however many weeks or months, and we can see how things are going and look at the numbers and see what makes sense. So I think that's probably what we should be thinking about for the way to craft something to plan for that opening. Especially because I think because you're still waiting for the final approval, we don't know exactly when you're going to open. I mean, it could be sooner, it could be later, and I think that if it's 3 months from now versus 8 months from now, that may be a totally different landscape for what's going on in the cannabis industry in Easthampton.
Right. It won't be 3 months, and it may not, we're hoping it's not 8 months.
Right.
It will be somewhere in the middle of there.
Yeah.
And we will have a better idea of, the more these open up, the more we can look at how their plans worked, what tools they implemented. A lot of our suggestions in our plan came from, ATG. We've been working with their CEO. They did the reservation, and they're currently still doing the reservation system in Salem, and it's working out very well. So we're definitely not opposed to anything like that, and we will.
That doesn't seem to have discouraged people from coming out, or maybe to the amount you want it to discourage some people from coming out, so you're not swamped, or?
Well, yeah, and I think Salem's a little bit different. They're a bigger city. They're Eastern Mass. They're the only one in Eastern
Right.
Mass right now. So there was a lot of forethought, the same forethought we want to put into this in doing that. So they are revisiting that plan right now. I think they allow, 80 people per. Don't quote me on that. A certain amount of people per hour can reserve.
Yep.
Time slots, and as they come in, so they're still not taking people off the street. You have to have that reservation to get in there.
Okay, so if you've only got 2 people in there, under Salem's at least, your understanding is if a third person shows up at the door, they're saying you gotta at least pull out your phone and go online and make a reservation and
Go
come back in
online,
3
make
minutes.
your reservation. That's correct.
Okay, interesting. I don't want to jump ahead. Keep going here if you got a question.
Yeah, you got down to number 6, you got down pre-ordering, and then right next to it, you got down to if allowed. Well, is it allowed or isn't allowed? I mean, was this made after they made the decision, or this had to come out before, I would think?
Number 6 in the startup plan.
Yeah, the opening day, yep.
The opening day.
Yeah, you got down to pre-ordering, then you got down right next to it, it says if allowed.
Well, we're not sure if the cannabis under medical you couldn't do that pre-ordering. That may have, it's ambiguous right now.
So
Cannabis
in other words,
control-
you're not really sure if you can pre-order or not, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's happening now, so, I would say it is happening now.
Yeah.
Will you
So,
have that settled?
What's that?
You have that settled before you open,
Yes,
the pre-ordering?
yes. And I think it is settled now.
It might be. but
It's happening, so.
It's certainly happening, so.
I
All right.
want to know if it's going to be happening for them.
I don't want to throw you off your list here. If you want to keep moving
Sure,
through, we can
sure.
get to those when we get there.
Waste disposal, again, we wanted to update on our regular retail disposal is going to happen through the dumpster and through waste management. And our marijuana disposal, any marijuana waste that comes our way, either returned products, expired products, a little bit of waste from packaging, is going to be returned to our wholesale partners. So that'll be part of our agreement with them, that when they make a delivery and we have waste product, it'll go back with them to be destroyed. And that's what we're seeing, you know, coming out in the industry, where everybody else prior to this was vertically integrated. They had their cultivation sites. They would just bring their stuff back to their cultivation site and destroy it. We're gonna, you know, part of our contract with these people, or with these groups, are that they'll do that for us.
And I assume you've been in discussions with vendors that can handle that?
Yep.
Okay.
We have an executed wholesale agreement right now.
You do?
We do.
Okay. And where is that coming from?
The Green Gold Group, they're out of North Brookfield.
Okay.
They're a medical marijuana operator, and they will be an adult use operator by the time we're open. Delivery of marijuana products. So attachment 3 in the package. We didn't want to give too much public information on this, but deliveries are going to occur at the back door, the delivery door. We're gonna be in charge of our deliveries. So if we call up our wholesale partner and we set up a delivery, we're gonna know the time, we're gonna know the vehicle, we're gonna know who's coming. We're gonna be monitoring them. If you go through this plan, we're gonna have phone monitoring as they're approaching. We are gonna have our agents out there checking the area, making sure there's no suspicious persons, vehicles, circumstances going on. If we do find, you know, somebody lurking out there, or a vehicle that, you know, is just, you know, doesn't feel right, we're gonna cancel the delivery. We're gonna call the police, have it checked out. We're not gonna take any chances on deliveries. We're gonna attempt to have deliveries in the daylight, but prior to opening, you know, so obviously the seasons are gonna be a little bit difficult for us. But we're gonna have at least 2 of our agents ready for the deliveries. The vehicle will pull up. It should take less than a minute to get the products from the vehicle into our facility, where they can then be inventoried, and the delivery people can go back on their way. Anybody we deliver with has to have 2 agents in that vehicle. One will stay with the vehicle. One will exit and do the delivery, help us inside the store with it, with our at least 2 agents. They are going to be GPS monitored by their company, by their entity, and us. So we're going to know where they are, where they can come, you know, how close they are, and things like that. So this has been done in medical already. You know, I know of a group, you know, they deliver in Boston. There's no parking, there's no sally ports. They pull up on the sidewalk next to the store. They have 2 agents ready and waiting. They have their 2 agents in the vehicle, and they have it down pat where it's, you know, it's 30 seconds in and out with bins. You know, there's no big, huge bulk packages coming in. These are in like storage crates that, you know, lockable storage crates that go in. So it's not like we need a forklift or a hand truck or anything like that.
Right.
It's rather quick process getting it from the vehicle into our facility.
Can you just reconfirm the anticipated frequencies of delivery?
You know, I'd like
Not
to.
time specifically, but a frequency, number of
I'm
times a
thinking
day.
weekly. If we get a big order and sales are down, you know, that could go every other week. If things are busy, maybe it goes twice a week, but I would not see it go further than that, or any more frequent than that. And again, we're going to be in charge of when that delivery happens. You know, they're going to want us waiting. They're going to need us waiting. They just can't show up and say, "Hey, here's your delivery." It's not UPS. It's very regulated. It's very tracked.
Yeah, well, this is a new one for us because it's public, right? I mean, you're out in a parking lot where there's people that are entitled to be there. It's not sort of a secure garage or facility. So, I mean, I think that there's, obviously it's in your interest as well as everyone else's to make sure that you're minimizing that risk, and there's security cameras and there's going to be agents and what have you.
Right, and we do have the back of the facility covered with 2 security cameras, and we're going to have what's called a video intercom. So when you're on the inside of our facility, you're going to have a screen there where you can look out and make sure there's nobody outside.
Mm-hmm.
You know, plus our other 2 cameras. So You know, our front, our rear and front exteriors are covered by security cameras.
Okay. Jeff, do you have a question?
I think it's just a point of clarification, but so what is before the board is this retailer, special permit, and you have a license, a provisional license from the Cannabis Control Commission. So, the requirement for cameras in the back, and something like the video intercom is something that is required of you. But then the Cannabis Control Commission is also separately licensing these delivery companies who are regulated by the Cannabis Commission so you said that they have to have 2 sort of people in every delivery vehicle, but I just wanted to clarify that those companies are seeking separate delivery licensing from the Cannabis Commission. Is that correct?
There's 2 types of delivery. So as a marijuana cultivator, you have the right to deliver your own product with that license. There's also third-party delivery where somebody who does not have a cultivation or product manufacturing license can apply and be approved to deliver third-party transport. So, but they fall under the same regulations for security, the amount of agents, and all of that.
So is the third-party delivery a license category that's currently being considered by the commission? So is it the other element of delivery to people's homes?
No.
That's currently not allowed?
That's correct.
Okay, can you just clarify that quick?
Home delivery of adult use marijuana is not allowed at this time. It may be, it probably will be, but right now you cannot do home delivery for adult use marijuana. If you are a medical marijuana RMD, you can do home delivery to qualified registered patients.
But there is a system to allow a company to deliver to a retail establishment?
Yes.
License. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Can I just, on the same vein, if we roll back real quick to the trash component, you talked about working with another company to get trash, and you said that they were going to, or rather, take your trash back, but we're taking that on faith. I'm assuming, similarly to what you just said, they're independently licensed, that company, but I see no paperwork to fulfill our requirement to make sure that you're eliminating that stuff from them. It seems to me that you'd have to, as part of your agreement with them, get some piece of paper that says they're licensed to have it. Here's the license that they agree to take that trash back, so that we know with certainty and not just by hearsay that it's being eliminated appropriately.
We could do that as part of the wholesale agreement, provide that to you.
Good question.
So just going back to the parking space issue, I guess with respect to deliveries, is that, and I guess deliveries is also the cannabis waste pickup, would they be using that parking space that's identified in this package, or are they just planning on pulling in and doing a quick in and out?
So their agent will come inside with us once the product's in, because we're gonna inventory, the delivery, make sure, what is on our manifest, what we ordered is there. So we foresee that delivery, they would back up to our door, the product would come inside, they'd pull into that parking space, because there's one driver that has to stay with that vehicle.
Okay.
They would come back in, I assume, 5, 10, 15 minutes, would go through, make sure the manifests match, and then they'd be on their way.
Okay.
Moving on to exterior lighting. The front of the building, we're going to have a motion-activated light in our little foyer area. So after hours, if somebody were in there, we're trying to, manipulate the door or anything like that, that motion light would come on. It's cambered. Again, 3 times. We have 2 cameras out front going in opposite directions, picking up Cottage Street. And then we'll also have that video intercom out there. So they'd be picked up on 3 cameras out there. As far as the back of the facility, if you see under that green awning,
All right. Right here. I have the revised packet, so I'm trying to find the correct.
Attachment 3.
It's on the very first page, is the green awning picture.
so you have that green awning, that covers 72 and 74 Cottage Street. So right now, there is a floodlight installed in there. We'd probably do a new floodlight in there, motion activated. If anybody approached the back of our building, the light would come on. There also is some supplemental lighting in there. There's a utility pole in the parking area that lights the parking area in the rear of our building. And there's also a utility light, city-owned utility light on Pine Street that illuminates that area.
I'm sure it's in here somewhere, but can you remind me what the hours are that you're thinking about being open?
10 in the morning to 11.
10 to 11, 7 days a week?
Start with just to find out what the week parts are, yes.
10 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Okay.
Number 5, we kind of went over the occupancy in the restroom. You know, we will be putting the restroom in, and this is our planned occupancy for those areas.
May I ask a question? So I'm going to jump in with the waiting area, the person trap.
Yep.
So I know that you have a lot of experience under the medical program. For the adult use, does it specify, does the Cannabis Control Commission regulations have any requirements for the person trap in terms of having that many people in what's, so I think this board has limited experience with the trap concept, but it's to be the place where people enter as they're ID'd before they actually enter the sales floor. So are you aware of whether the CCC would be allowing a larger number of people in that designated area?
So there is no regulation on the person trap. It's kind of just become an industry standard where, you know, as an operator, we don't want to, you know, we want 2 means of entrance into the sales area. So there's no regulation that says you have to have one of these. I don't know of any facility that does not have it. And in Massachusetts here, it was caught on in medical. You know, everybody had a person trap or some other, you know, similar device where people could come in to one area with no regulated product and have to go through another secure door to get to the regulated product. So I don't know of any commission regulations or guidance that would pertain to this.
So do the customers show their ID to get in the front door too? Or
Yes.
Okay.
So they're going to show up to the front door and they're going to, you know, hold up that they have a mass ID.
Yep.
And that's not regulatory. You can enter, but we have to immediately check your ID, and that's the kind of reason for the person trap, is to make sure, you know, we're checking those IDs. You know, people aren't going to be pushing by us to get into the regulated area. So we'll check their ID, we'll scan it. If they come up, you know, if they have the proper ID, it's that person in the picture. Then they're allowed to wait in the man trap or the person trap and then go into the regulated area. So if there's any question to the validity of the ID or the identification of the person, they won't be admitted, and everybody has to show an ID to get in.
So that's where I get confused in this queuing plan. Maybe it just requires a little bit more clarification. It says, as customers approach the facility, they will gain entry on the waiting area in one of 2 ways. The customer will ring a video intercom that alerts the agent. The agent will ask the customer to show the government-issued ID to the camera.
Yep.
The agent can then greet the customer and open the door, or open the door remotely from inside the dispensary. So if they open the door remotely, there is nobody then, there is no agent there. Is that correct in the person trap?
Correct. The agent would come out into the person trap, check the ID, scan it, and then they'd be allowed through.
So that's the second time they're looking and scanning this ID to confirm that they're 21 or older.
That would be the first time. So they're showing it to the camera just to show that they have a mass ID.
Okay, so you're not checking if they're 21 at that point. You're not checking if they're, if you're
Right.
just saying, yeah, I have an ID. It could be a college ID. It could be,
Well, no, it has to be a mass license, mass ID, another state.
Massachusetts or, okay.
Yes. Another state's ID or license or passport or military ID.
Does it have to be photo?
Photo, yes. And so they're holding it up there.
That doesn't really count as the first check. The first check
Right.
is then
First
the
check
agent
is
comes
when
out.
they come in, that's where they take it, they look at it. Okay, this is the person, we scan it, then they're allowed into the sales area. And the second check is at the point of sales.
Got it, okay. So, okay, so the other option is an agent will greet the customer at the door, inspect their license, and then open the door. So is the customer then putting their license up against the glass door or
So they're
something?
just, yes, I have an ID. That agent may be standing right outside, you know, they may not be exactly in there. It depends on volume, so I'm sure it'll depend on weather also, but, I foresee if this is, if we're at a high volume time, we're gonna have somebody outside, check the ID, okay, you're 21, go inside, get it scanned now, and then go inside the sales area,
When you say outside, you don't mean the man trap, you mean outside the building?
outside the facility.
Which means that people standing outside the door could be a normal thing.
Yeah,
Essentially during high volume periods, yeah.
Is that front door locked? I mean, is the agent the only one that can let someone into that front door?
it's RFID, electronic lock, so
Okay.
they would have
They have a badge or something that, okay.
So it says during high volume times, there will be an agent assigned to the waiting area, and if so low volume times, the anticipation is there won't be anyone in that waiting area, except maybe a couple people waiting.
If there's somebody in the waiting area, there's gonna be one of our agents there.
Okay.
So, that was meant if, it's a, weekday, we don't have any customers.
That person doesn't need to stand there.
Right.
Okay.
I just have a problem with the queuing plan. I like that there's more space now in the man trap, and I appreciate that you got rid of the bathroom to do that, because it was really alarming to me at the last meeting we had that there was so little overflow. There's more now, and that's better, but I still think there'll be times when you get inundated, and it may be rare, but maybe more in the beginning, later. Regardless, I still think there'll be times when you get inundated, and I'm very uncomfortable with the concept of the people having to line up on the street and the other businesses having to deal with that, and the ramifications of what that means for our community. I do personally believe that what I call our little Bermuda Triangle, the place where people go to have entertainment, is right in that spot, and I personally think it's the perfect place for this kind of business. But I don't think it's appropriate if it's overflowing into the street, as I would feel about any bar or anything else like that. That's a problem for me. And I'm really looking for a better system than I've seen so far. I think you came as close as I could hear about having a phased approach to putting something in. But the queuing in the street, it's a problem for me.
If you can come up to the microphone just so it records everything. Thanks.
Another methodology that we were talking about is a shuttle service. So we were talking about, what was it, the Polish Club? So we could maybe have people park at the Polish Club. If it,
We haven't approached them yet, so.
Yeah, that's not enough for me though, because what's going to happen is you won't know in a large group.
Yeah.
There's 50 people over at the bar celebrating a birthday, and they all decide, let's go get some weed, and they cross the street, and boom, you got a huge audience. And
I'm
then,
thinking more about the opening time.
yeah.
Also,
Well,
a shuttle,
but
I mean,
these
the
are times
shuttle's
you have
gonna
to
bring
think about.
30 people over and just put them in front anyways, right? So
Well, we would
then they'll
tell
line
them
up.
when to bring them over, just
Yeah.
like they were
Yeah.
doing Leicester. But I'm thinking about sort of the beginning.
Yeah.
Once it's rolling, yeah, that's a little bit different issue.
I mean, I personally really don't see how we do this at the beginning without an appointment kind of system. I mean,
I
I'm
concur.
uncomfortable
I
with it being
concur.
open.
I think what I'd also really like to see is a plan showing to scale those 15 people standing in that person trap, because they're going to be shoulder to shoulder.
Like a visualization.
And
Yeah, an actual from the top. If you see a head and shoulders, an actual person to scale as they walk through that door, so we can see what 15 people look like in that.
And I think related to that, the sort of what I was asking about before, how we're gonna weave that line of people, where they're
Yeah.
gonna be waiting and when they're gonna get called up to the.
24 people
I'm
look like
struggling
in
to see how
that.
that's all going to fit in there, so I think it'd be helpful to see sort of a visualization of how we think people will fit in there.
And I'm going to go crazy out of the box, but I think there might be yet another solution where people who are lining up outside, you can have them go somewhere else. Maybe to one of the
Well,
bars. I don't know where it
That's
is.
one of our plans is they can come up and, we have a 20-minute wait.
Take 'em
Here,
out
take
to the
this
ball
token,
game.
go have a drink next door.
It's helpful.
Right.
Something that says we're not allowing you to be outside, but we'll give you some incentive to do something downtown that's beneficial for everyone.
I think my only concern with
Say
that
ice
is
cream
that
and
you
Yeah, I
can
know. Here it comes.
you can put them in a virtual line, right? So you take, I think the example is like the buzzer at a restaurant, right? So you get the light up buzzer at Olive Garden and you can go wander around the mall while you wait. But I don't know how you're going to force people to not stand in front anyways, right? So like if you want to go grab a beer, you can go grab a beer. If you want to go shop at one of the stores, you can, but how are you going to stop 12 people from just standing in front anyways?
Come out and say
you've
no
drawn them?
loitering.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, but you're right.
So I think we're gonna have to
Yeah.
think outside the box on this. I really do think
You're
that it's
right.
gonna have to be something other than let's just cross our fingers and hope that there's never more than 15 people that show up.
But we need more creativity to get them off the street, because that's a big line for me, and we need better solutions.
Yeah, we can't have just, these are the options. It has to be a definitive plan on how you're gonna do it.
Well, our plan was to meet with the city and come up with that plan.
Okay.
To watch, what's happening in other communities where these are opening up and what works and what doesn't work. We are open to any suggestions. We will take the, the plan the city wants to implement. We're not gonna push back on it. We want an orderly, rollout of this. Again, I think those times may happen, but I think they're gonna be few and far between, especially once this gets going. Our opening plan, we pull out all the stops on whatever the city wants to do. We're gonna hire our own security if we need. We're gonna hire police details. We're gonna kind of, do whatever it takes to minimize any impact. And a definitive plan right now may not even come close to, what's gonna happen, when we do open. It may be a lot different. The picture might be a lot different. So we wanted this to keep this fluid and start this conversation. If we were, if we are granted a special permit, move this forward on an initial meeting with the stakeholders, and then, a month down the road, another meeting with the stakeholders. As we get closer to that proposed opening, come up with a definitive plan that's approved by, the police department and the city.
Yeah, so Jeff.
Well, I think that when you say, a plan by, approved by the city, I think we're really gonna need to flip some of the clarity to this board first. I think in order for the board to grant a special permit, you're gonna need more clarity and a couple of things more definitive in order to grant the special permit. So I think a clear framework and an outline of, a specific outline of what's the minimum things that you're going to do. The chief of police has been fairly clear that he has the authority to ask really, a lot more of you that's going to go beyond the planning board. But this board has to have a clear minimum standard that you're going to achieve in order to grant the special permit. So,
and I think if things need to be fluid, I think it can't really be fluid before opening day. Like, I think we can talk about this while we're continuing this, and we can work out what you think will work. But it may have to be something that everything's by appointment only until 6 weeks or 8 weeks after, and then you come back for a review hearing and we look at it, and that's when we have the chief of police come in and we have anybody else that might have issues, neighbors, whatever, and they say this is going great. Or we look at your numbers and we say, boy, if these people didn't have appointments, you filled every hourly slot for the last 6 weeks, we need to do this another month or two, or what have you. I mean, maybe that's where the flexibility is after the opening, if we have it set up for sort of recurring reviews. But for us, I mean, the stakeholders who decide this are really us, with the input from the chief of police, more or less, and the public and the neighbors. And so that's something that we have to do before we can grant any sort of special permit, is have some comfort that we haven't sort of let the cat out of the bag and erred on the side of chaos for that first 6 weeks. And then maybe we can come back and say these numbers are reasonable, and you know what, you can probably do it without a limit, or maybe it's not. But I think that's sort of the structure we need to be thinking about.
and a couple of this. Sorry.
Actually, I'm sorry. Are you actually leaning towards appointments only? Is that where you want to start?
Yes, if it's needed. Again, what's going to happen in 6 months from now, we don't know. But yes, if we feel appointment or reservations are needed.
If the
we're gonna
board
do that.
says that we feel that appointments or reservations would be the proper thing to do, and this would help you in going ahead with this, would you make that plan and get that implemented in a plan so that we could see it?
Yeah.
Appointments or reservations are probably the better way to go in the beginning. Even the police chief said that he would give extra people on his side as long as you brought in some extra people.
Yes, and that is part of our plan, I know it's not a concrete plan, but, you know, reservations, us hiring our own staff and us also hiring, you know, police details and things like that are all part of it.
Okay, yeah, Jeff.
So just not to jump on you with a couple of things that I think are really going to be worth clarifying. The architect can certainly draw the stanchion outline of both of these areas. So just a quick point of confusion for me is on the lower right, it's hard to see on the screen, but it's grayed out. So the person trap, you know, the architect's calling out 23 occupants, but you're suggesting 15. So I think you could provide some clarity about where people will be standing upon entry and keeping a clear path of exit. And then once you're in the sales area, I think, as the chair alluded to, I think you really can now kind of outline the flow of people standing in a line and really fact check the number of people that you can fit in there.
Right, 24 people can really fit in there realistically.
The two things that I really would urge the board to consider is the idea of a shuttle and a satellite parking. If this continues to be a point of discussion, I think the planning board really should not approve the special permit without you identifying a property that you can come to a tentative agreement with. I think the board's going to need some surety that a shuttle service could actually work, and that might be like the minimum standard to require as a condition. And then what the board talked about was maybe backing off of that after opening, and if things go smooth, then the board can build a structure where you can reduce that or eliminate that. And then the last thing, just in case it takes shape, is the idea of a I don't even know what it's actually called, the waiting system where you get a buzzer or texting, or the idea of going somewhere else.
With a commitment that you're not going to let people stand outside, you're going to actively tell them don't stand outside.
Right, and I think if you're going to propose a pretty strategic, a very specific thing where it's really worthwhile for the board to have something akin to an agreement with some other establishment that can show them that that's actually doable, that you have another place on Cottage Street that would be willing to work with you on a token idea or something like that. So I think anything that gets proposed as an option at this point looks like you might need to really secure all the elements as the minimum standard, and then work with the board to then figure out a schedule to sort of wean off of some of those mitigation measures.
Yes.
Can you go back up to
Please
the
go back up.
microphone? Sorry, there's people will want, thousands of people at home watching.
So part of what's in that
Probably
packet
are.
mentions that we were going to meet with the city and the police 60 days before opening, 30 days before opening, 7 days before opening, and then a couple days before opening. So that's,
Yeah, so some of that can be done in that kind of a system. I mean, I think that, you know, the nuts and bolts of like how many people you need staffing a traffic detail, like that's gonna be something that like we can require that you will supplement your staff with either security or police officers or what have you. And you can maybe work out the nuts and bolts of that, but it's gonna have to be with us at a public hearing where we talk about whether you're gonna be using reservations only and for how long, whether we're gonna be able to do a shuttle system and parking and where you're gonna do that, whether you're gonna do a reservation or like a buzzer system where you walk around, like that's gonna have to be done before we can grant a special permit. We're gonna have at least an opening plan where for a period of weeks or months, you're gonna do what we've said, and then we'll come back and then we can have conversations with the police, with the neighbors, with you, look at numbers and decide what can be lessened or what needs to stay the same. Because we can't, those sort of details can't get worked out in the dark and out of a
I
public
was thinking we
hearing.
would work with the police department, but I guess I had the wrong idea on that.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously are gonna defer to the police on a lot of this stuff, especially when it deals with traffic and security and that stuff. I mean, they're the expert on that, but it's gonna still have to be in the context of a special permit with conditions or requirements that are gonna have to have an opening day plan and a period of time where that's in effect.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So I think you covered most of the stuff in here. I want to make sure that we have time to get public comment. So is there anything else you want? What's that?
I have one question about
Yep.
the odor control plan. You
Yep.
did provide a bunch of good information about the carbon filtration, but there's no location on the plans about where these will be situated on the plans.
So they are mobile, and in there, we will have one downstairs. It's in the narrative. We will locate it downstairs in that hallway where we're gonna have our vault and where we're gonna have our packaging. If we're in packaging operations, we'll move it right inside that room during that time. and then at the other times it would be in that common hallway area.
Okay.
As for upstairs, it would be centrally located, in the sales area, against the wall. Again, these are mobile units. They're just plugged in. So, we would find the best spot for that.
Yeah. Normally I would, and thank you. I mean, normally I really would want to see where this was on the plan and how it's entering and exiting. But since they're mobile, and since the space is so
Yeah.
small, and you're not actually growing and cultivating, for me personally, that information I think is going to fly.
And the units we're using, are, overkill, but
They
They are.
do.
we
They're
want it
good.
that way. 'Cause
Well, it's also, I mean, because of your location, it's gonna be something where if your neighbors can smell it, they're gonna complain, and you're gonna have an issue,
That's
so.
why we've.
So, I mean, you're gonna be more concerned about making sure there's no odor than even your neighbors are, because I'm sure that they'll be looking for that.
I agree.
Okay. Opening this up to the public, I will say we do have a second hearing, and we are looks like we're gonna continue this to another meeting, so we don't have to get everybody in today, but I realize a lot of people have come out, I think, for this, so if there's anybody who has any comments or questions, you wanna come up here, that would be great. And to the applicant, if they're asking questions that you want to answer, if you can just wait until they're done so that we can swap out and you can go up to the podium so everyone can hear.
Hi, Annette Siegel, Mutter Street. First off, I'm not opposed to recreational marijuana stores anywhere in Easthampton. It's up on Cottage Street. Cottage Street is a very congested street. The traffic is horrendous on that street. There's very little parking for the businesses that are there now. And the safety of pedestrians and anybody who walks through town is very, very important. I see the cars coming, I'm a crossing guard. I see the cars coming down Holyoke Street. And when they're looking for something that they don't know where it is, they kind of just stop. Sometimes they just make U-turns. Sometimes they just go, huh. So I just think Cottage Street is just not an appropriate place. Our safety, we all know our safety of our streets are very important right now. So when you're looking at considering this special permit, I would like you to consider not. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am Stacy Waldman. I have a shop at 22 Cottage Street. I have no problem with marijuana, but I have a problem with this business on Cottage Street because of parking. And nobody is going to go for a trolley or whatever when they're saying, well, I'm going to go to Luthier's and have a beer first, so I'll find a place to park. There's no parking.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
If no one else is, okay, there is one.
Hi, I'm Sabrina Marsh. I give my address, 20 Knight Avenue. And I am part of Two Pines Studio on Pine Street. And we have parking spaces. I know my landlord is here also, that I'm always struggling with being full of other cars. And so I'm very concerned about how we ensure that those spaces aren't being used because they are private for this space. There's a driving school, an attorney's office, and a studio space. And as it is, as I said, those spaces are already overflowing with other businesses using them. So I'm very concerned that this is not the best space for this business, but I'm not opposed to this business.
Thank you.
When they're all done.
Again, I'm David Sayak, landlord of Sabrina at the Art Institute, and I'm also not opposed to marijuana shops opening, but I'm still concerned about the parking. I know that you detailed since the last meeting extra spaces that may be available, but you got to think about the employees. Where are they going to park, and their customers? And I think these guys are running a tight ship trying to get this in business. I just wish it was somewhere else. I'm concerned about the parking and just loitering. I mean, they may have a no loitering sign out there, which is fine, but a driving school with parents and Art Institute with your kids coming to see you. I mean, loitering in my lot across the street at 2 Pine Street. I mean, I'm concerned about that. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm concerned about that too. And maybe the business is losing business because of that shop. Again, I think they got a great operation potentially there to be there, but I wish it was somewhere else. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I just want to make a comment. Pun intended, we have a parking problem in Easthampton in that area, and it's high time that we do something about it.
High time, that
Gotcha.
is.
But there's an issue that you should all be aware of. See, Cottage Street, is grandfather the right word here? I don't think it is, but essentially grandfathers the parking requirement in that zone, which means we can't consider parking in our special permits.
Exempt from our.
It is exempt.
Well, there
And
is
I wanna
there is an
put-
exception to that.
I
I
thought
mean,
I was
there's
gonna-
language, but
an
Go for it, you're a
exception.
lawyer, bring it out.
well, I mean, for all of the parking requirements, we have the ability to go above whatever the standard is, whether it's 0 or 5 or 10, if we think that the use justifies it, which we haven't had to do recently, but I think the idea of it is for something that's sort of a unique industry. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know that this is really part of the reason why the parking is different in downtown is because you can't really add parking. It's not
Exactly.
like
It's
designing a
unreasonable
Cumberland
ask.
farm where we can talk about extending your parking lot or what have you. So it may end up being, I mean, it essentially is a moot point to require more parking, but I don't think it means that we can't consider it or the effects of all the people that will come, whether it's the queuing or the loitering or what have you. So
And that I agree with. And, you know, bringing up the shuttle is something you did, otherwise we normally wouldn't touch on it because of that grandfathering. I do think you have the potential to bring in more traffic. Any business has more traffic. Are you more than some other business, a restaurant that goes in there? I don't really know the answer to that. So really the problems we're having are Easthampton problems for Cottage Street, not really specific to your business when it comes to parking. I love that you threw out the idea of doing the shuttle, and I hope you keep considering it because it's clear the neighbors feel strongly on it, and happy neighbors make for a successful business. But I think everyone in the audience really needs to understand that we're treading a thin line when we try to put parking requirements in. This is something that needs to go to our city council, needs to be a discussion that we bring up and put on our agenda and start to really do something about in this city. You know, maybe making one-way traffic or roadways, I don't know what it is, but it is a problem. It's a real problem. And I think that just dealing with people one-off and making you the first scapegoat for this issue is kind of unfair. Really, we need a bigger solution to the problem. I just want to say that.
So can I add something quick? So just to throw those kind of the topics on the table, I think the zoning is fairly clear that it's challenging to require parking be put on this property. So that's kind of the beautiful part of our downtown is that you can establish a new business and you don't have to put parking on your property. That's how zoning often works, is your use on a property and the parking is right there. And so that's what is exempt. That's fairly exempt. It's fairly clear that it's exempt. And I think that there's not a lot of space on this property to provide parking spaces. So I think we'll encounter that discussion. That'll be a pretty quick discussion. I think I tried to take a stab at this at the last meeting. I think that there is an element that the board can consider in terms of managing parking. So tools that the business can utilize to manage the parking. And I see the shuttle as one potential tool. It may not be the tool that is ultimately chosen, but what it might enable the owner to do is sort of channel people in a controlled manner to the place and deal with the occupancy. I think what we're really looking at is maybe less about parking, but more about patron management. So let's assume everyone finds a parking space, and let's assume they visit multiple places on Cottage Street. Maybe we put parking aside, but it's how does the business owner manage the people who are going to his establishment? And I think so managing people and maybe parking management strategies. So I think the idea of a satellite lot or a shuttle should not be taken off the table yet. The other is really this idea of appointments, which is another sort of strategy to manage patrons. And then there's a couple other ones that I think the applicant could still have at his disposal to propose. So I think if maybe we take a shot at going through a summary list of the things that the board would like to see sort of revisited and come back.
yeah, before we do that, I just want to read. There was one email and the letter from the chief of police into the record. So we received an email from Joanne O'Leary. To the planning board, please read at the public meeting Tuesday, January 15th, 2019. Please consider these 3 issues concerning the Cottage Street cannabis shop. 1, the safety of traffic, both foot and vehicle, and all parking. 2, the need to restrict the visibility in all media of all references to cannabis products from street view. The city already compromised on the distance from schools by reducing the distance and measuring in walking steps, not as the crow flies. Many school kids will still be in this vicinity. Public visibility does affect attitudes and beliefs. We are still far behind in educating kids and the public about the realities of cannabis. And number 3, need for a license for cannabis shops in addition to a permit. My understanding is that Easthampton requires a permit only but not a license, as with alcohol. Licensing will give the city the authority and the revenue to inspect, to check on legal age sales, etc., and to require corrections, levy fines, etc. if necessary. I believe it is common sense to have a license in place before issues arise. Businesses should welcome licensing. It shows good faith in running their business in a way that's good for them and the community. If licensing cannot be addressed now, how, when, and where can it be? Thanks for considering these important issues. So just in answer to that, licensing would be a city council issue to add that as an option. But and then there was also a response from the chief of police regarding this application. On January 11th, 2019, members of the Easthampton Police Department had a preliminary meeting with the Verb Herb LLC to discuss their project proposal at 74 Cottage Street in Easthampton, Mass. We discussed many of the potential challenges that may be associated with opening this type of business in our downtown district, i.e. parking, line queuing, traffic patterns, congestion, etc. After reviewing their initial security policies and procedures, site plan and camera plan, I am satisfied with the proposed physical security of the location. The Easthampton Police Department will continue to make recommendations to the Verb Herb LLC with regards to safety as the project moves forward. So, did you have something, John?
You know, I just wanted to go on what Jeff was saying, that on the shuttling, I think that's probably where we'll probably go, but the problem or the issue with that is from and to. Where do we shuttle people to, or where do we get them from, bring them back?
Right.
It's
So-
gonna cause issues somewhere else. Someone may not want the shuttles. We have to find, are we obligated to find a spot for these people, or is it up to
No,
them?
and I think that's exactly why we need to know where the site is, because as was explained, I think the idea would be that you'd be on a radio and you would say, okay, we can take another 20 people, but then instead of queuing on Cottage Street, you're queuing at the Polish Club or wherever you
Yeah.
have a deal with, right? So like, I think all of that would need to be considered based on where that off-site parking is, but I think getting to Jeff's point about things to look for a continued meeting, I think we talked about the plan sort of showing a little more detail about what's going on in the queuing area there, and or first of all, I guess in the person trap and how that will flow, and then also how customers will flow once they go into the queuing area and the sales area, and showing sort of a visualization of how those people will all actually fit in there comfortably. And I think we talked about the idea of how you might propose a reservation. Maybe talking to Salem a little more about what they do there and what's worked for them, and also discussing a plan for either in addition to that or instead of that or something else where there's some sort of off-site waiting where you can get a buzzer or a token or a text or something telling you to come back, and how you would also, I think in connection with that, is how you would encourage people to leave your premises but also not just cross the street and wait in the parking lot by the driving school, right, or something like that. That doesn't solve any of the problems. So thinking about ways to move people somewhere else and spread them out maybe. And then in connection with that, the idea of a shuttle, and if there's an agreement for how to do that, and where and how you would propose running that logistically. And Jim also raised a good point about something confirming that the suppliers of your product are also going to be agreeing to take the stuff off site, because I think that's important for us to verify. Anything else that we?
I'm impressed.
That's great.
Well done.
I'm
You
still
write it
awake.
down.
Yeah, I got
It's
something
all
to say.
in your
Can I say something?
Please, Harry.
The only question I have, I know people come up there and they say, I'm for marijuana, but I don't want it on Cottage Street. All right, so that's fine. What happens if someone wants to put it up on Union Street? What's gonna happen then? Then they're gonna people come up there and say, well, I don't want it on Union Street. So then where do we go from there? Where do you draw the line here? If something is zoned and it's passed the ordinance and everything else, you just can't deny a permit. I'm sorry, it's just the way it is. It always stands to reason it's common sense there's no parking downtown. We all know that. That's not the person who's filing for this business. It's not their problem. They don't have to have parking. So where do you draw the line? If you deny this guy to have his business, and then somebody else wants to open on Union Street or someplace else, you're going to tell them the same thing? This was passed through the city. This was allowed. So now you got to bear the consequences. All we heard was we got 65% of the people in Easthampton voted for marijuana. So if that's the case, this is what you're up against. So now you got to pay the piper. It's as simple as that. That's all I got to say.
All right, so how long do you think you guys would like to sort of gather this stuff together? I don't want to put you guys under the gun, but I also don't want to drag it out for you.
When's the next meeting?
I think our next one is February 5th. Does that sound right, Jeff?
Yep.
We have a 22nd too, right?
No, we don't.
Full.
No.
Oh,
It's full that day, yeah.
Well, it's just next week, so I think that would be a better agenda
no,
to have.
It's not a lot of time
Carries
now.
closed.
so February 5th is our next one, or February 19th is the one after that.
The filing deadline for the 5th would be January.
What's it, the Thursday before?
Yeah. probably, yes.
31st? I mean, if you need more time, I don't want you to have to come back and then say we couldn't get these two things,
No,
so.
we're gonna jump on this. We'll have something, submitted by the 31st for the 5th meeting.
Okay.
Now, is that gonna be something, or is it gonna be more definitive?
It's gonna be a
Yes, sir.
definitive plan.
What was the date
Okay,
you
because
picked?
it's something, sort of puts an arrow through my brain.
I motion to continue the public hearing for the Verbis Herb LLC and special permit for till February 5th.
Aye, second, third, fourth.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstaining? Okay. All right, thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone who participated. All right, moving right along.
Have a break.
Go home, I'm ready.
Restroom? If you go quick while everyone clears out.
5-minute break.
All right, we'll wait 2 minutes for people before we start.
Yeah.
That's all I'm
why
willing to
not?
give.
How about 3?
No.
Final offer.
Run this, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got 2 and you will like it.
You're gonna have to get some incompetence pants or something. I know I'm on the air, ain't
Great.
You're off the air. You're on something else.
They do not,
Yeah, I
they do
know.
not edit this out either.
No editing.
I learned that the other day.
What, you can't edit it out?
You can, but it doesn't. That's asking a lot.
We don't, because it would be considered inappropriate to edit things from the film. We cut it from where the motion to start is and the motion to adjourn is.
Oh, right, and everything in the
Everything
Yeah,
is
so like the
stays.
other night when we had like that 45-minute break or whatever,
Yeah.
It's all in there.
It's
all
in
streaming.
there, yeah.
Lovely.
Why, you had a problem with that break? Right.
Great.
what am I doing with it? All right, I'm going. Jeff, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not back yet, is that right?
Close enough.
Oh, Jim? Yeah.
It's all right, because he's an associate.
Boom.
I don't know, I'm asking the question, I'm not saying. Sorry. He's a lovely guy.
Good to
Yeah, we love each other.
All right, next up on the agenda, River Valley Co-op seeking a special permit to construct an approximately 22,000 square foot supermarket building and all other associated site improvements, including but not limited to parking, landscaping, lighting, drainage features, solar, and maintaining an existing accessory restaurant use at 228, 232 Northampton Street. Is there someone here to present to this?
This was quite a read.
Oh, yeah.
Good evening. My name is Alan Seawald. I'm a lawyer in Northampton. I represent River Valley Co-op in this matter. I'm going to be really brief because I want to get on to introducing you to the folks at the co-op and then have the design team make a presentation. As you know, the co-op has an option, is in control of the property at on the, I would say, the southwest side of Route 10, former Fedor car dealership. It's about 10 acres. It's in the Highway Business District, and it requires a special permit. We have here tonight from the co-op, Rochelle Prunty, who is the general manager. And Rochelle, would you introduce yourself, please?
Can you come up, can I just ask you to come up to the microphone here, guys, so that everyone at home can hear?
Thank you for having us tonight. My name is Rochelle, and I'm the general manager for River Valley Co-op. We opened in Northampton about 10 years ago. This is Jade Barker, who's on our board of directors and one of our founding members. Liesl DeVore is our store manager, and Gary Schaefer is one of our founding members and a member of our board of directors. Monica Nunez is our project manager, and Natasha, our marketing manager, and did Emily? Oh, Emily can't be here. Okay, and our other board member from Easthampton, Emily Lane. So thank you so much. And just this is our first time before you, and I just want to give a little background. We're a community-owned grocery store in Northampton. We're owned by our customers. We have a little over 10,000 total customer owners, and about 1,700 of them are in this community. We feel very much like Easthampton and the co-op have a lot of well, it's a lot of the same people, and we've basically run out of room in Northampton, and by doing a second store here, we'll be able to better serve the co-op owners that are in Easthampton, and also the reason that one of the main reasons that we were founded was to support local farmers and a local food system. And over the past 10 years, we've made wholesale purchases of about $40 million locally. And one of the things about becoming too crowded is it's hard to keep growing that. And so to better support the farmers that we have more local farmers that would like to also supply us. And so this would be another way to help grow the local food system. And that's really supporting all local businesses, and definitely local farmers and food producers is sort of core to our mission. We're also, I think, a progressive employer. We're a union employer. Our employees are represented by the UFCW Local 1459. We have about 150 employees now, and we're looking at probably starting with about 70 employees here and growing it to 100 and beyond over time, as we have in Northampton. Our employees are 90% full-time. Our minimum starting wage is $15 an hour. I know everyone's going to be going to that in 4 years, but we're at that as our lowest level right now for entry. And also, we work really closely with nonprofits. We've contributed about $800,000, a little over $800,000 in the last 10 years, local nonprofits. Sponsorships, actual funds, in-kind contributions. We're really looking forward, and some of them are here in Easthampton too. And we're really looking forward to expanding on that. And I think that is all I want to say for right now. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Back to Howard.
I will say that I've been representing the co-op for 15 years at least before the store opened. And when this, the idea of expanding into a second store started, when we landed on this spot, it was very exciting. And I know there's a lot of excitement, both in the whole co-op community for this. The store, the proposed store and grounds were designed by Berkshire Design and Jeff Squire. The architect is Tom Douglas, so I'm going to turn it over to them and let them get down to the details of the project.
Can I ask one question? You said the property's in control. It used to be feeder. Can I confirm you have purchased the property?
We have not purchased. We have an option to purchase.
An option to purchase. Okay, thank you.
Once we get through this process, then we'll exercise the
Okay.
option.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Alan, and board members. Jeff Squire from the Berkshire Design Group. We're really excited to be here in front of you tonight. with this proposal. It's a site that, you know, I personally have driven by many times, and with the development that's occurred at that location, it's an exciting project to be able to bring to Easthampton. So on with the show, as they say. Obviously, you know the existing site. Quick aerial image. Lyman Street runs sort of across the screen here. Northampton Street, Route 10. Northampton continues off the page to the north. The site is at the corner of Lyman and Route 10 across the street from the new Cumberland Farms and Easthampton Savings Bank. Again, just a plan view. This 10-acre site in total consists of 3 individual parcels. There's the parcel that's furthest to the west, or the south, I'm sorry, that is primarily wetlands. What you see is sort of the hatched on the left side of the sheet there is you know, a separate parcel that contains predominantly wetlands. That system drains off to a culvert down in the lower left-hand corner and under Route 10. The bulk of the development on the site right now, which consists of the car dealership and showroom in the center of the site, surrounded by you know, parking lot, which extends over a little bit into the small triangular parcel at the corner where Captain Jack currently exists. So our project, you know, our project site is this entire site. So the development that we're really looking at and concentrating on is in this in the 5 acre on the north side. Again, existing conditions, just a blown up image of the current site. The existing showroom and building, garage building exists in the center of the site, surrounded by a parking area. Captain Jack's facility, the restaurant, is in the corner with some parking and gravel area out there. Again, just highlighting the scope of work. We're limiting our work, obviously, to the northern edge of the wetlands. We did go to the Conservation Commission last night for our first hearing. We continued that with a little bit more information that we need to provide them. But we did start that process, and we'll be before them again on you know, 2 weeks from now. The proposed site is to proposed project entails demolishing the existing building, reclaiming the existing parking lot, and largely sort of reconstructing the site in a more logical fashion that works for this use, this business, and what they want to do with the site. There's currently 4 curb cuts along Route 10. 3 of those are going to be closed. Actually, there's 4. There's one roughly in this location. There's one roughly in line with the Cumberland Farms entrance, one of the entrances, and then there's 2 for the Captain Jack's parking lot, if you will. So the proposal is to relocate the furthest, the southernmost curb cut, close the others, retain the one on Lyman Street as a delivery entrance to the loading dock on the north side of the building. But we are constructing a 22,000 square foot building, roughly, single story. I'll let Tom Douglas speak to the architecture in a few moments. But we've got a 200-car parking lot, accessible parking spaces directly out front. The main entrance to the building, as you'll see in some images later, is in this lower corner. So we're trying to you know, establish a real connection between the parking lot and the building. We've done that through a large, you know, pedestrian corridor through this larger island. This zone in front of the market is proposed right now is a stamped asphalt, you know, painted like brick type surface, just to indicate you know, a more pedestrian friendly zone. All truck traffic enter through this existing curb opening on Lyman Street. Part of this project also includes, is proposing the realignment of Lyman Street with Route 10. We are working with Mass Highway for multiple permits, access permits. This is one of them. The modifications to the curb, the entrance drives and curb cuts is another. And then there's also a proposal too, which I'll mention later, to widen Route 10 in that location for a dedicated right turn lane. We can speak to that a little bit later, but there are 3 concurrent permits being sought through Mass DOT. We've had multiple discussions with them and with city DOT, city engineers, so they're aware of, you know, what we're doing and certainly on board with this effort. Part of this involves dedicating back to the city about 6,000 square feet of property for that realignment. Again, it's in a real effort to improve traffic patterns on at that intersection particularly, and also to alleviate some of the concerns about truck traffic extending further up or continuing further up Lyman Street. This will provide an ability for trucks to actually turn right out of that intersection and continue south on Route 10, which they don't have the ability to do now. So that was, you know, that was something that we certainly wanted to offer as part of this project to help alleviate some of those concerns. So again, a widened driveway here, a single turn lane in, a right and a left turn lane right now is proposed as an exit. We've got some raised crosswalks, again, where there's this main pedestrian spine is. There's another raised crosswalk in this location. I'll highlight in some other plans later, but just some other site elements. We've got a low stone wall, which is part of the drainage system, which I'll speak to a little bit, but really it's intended to be a landscape feature. We've got a ground-mounted sign similar to their existing sign in Northampton proposed. I'll show you some images of that later. Car charging stations, bicycle racks, and then really on the street side, the public face to the building is really intended to, with the existing Captain Jack's restaurant, is to really enliven that outdoor space. So we want to continue that outdoor dining experience. They want to, oh boy. Uh-oh. Oh, that was me, sorry. There we go. On the outside of the building, to extend out that cafe space with some tables, some seating, some shelters, shade shelters, tongue twister, and just an opportunity to provide something else other than just a shopping experience. There is an indoor cafe space along this wall on the inside that Tom will speak to later, but again, it's really to in an effort to try and really, you know, enliven that space and create, you know, real pedestrian-friendly environment. Off of Lyman Street, there's an emergency access drive that was requested by the fire department, again, just to maintain emergency access on that side of the building. They are, what is proposed is just a gravel driveway sufficient to support their vehicles. We've also provided a couple of accessible spaces and a space for trash behind Captain Jack's, again with pedestrian access for some accessible spaces back there. What else? One of the proposals right now is also to include solar carports in the parking lot. So any of the stalls, with the exception of around this central island, just because of the way the solar panels would function, all of the other parking rows are proposed to be covered with solar carports, similar to what you might see. I think UMass has got some similar ones. They're stanchions with a solar panel overhang. These would both tip, so they you know, would be shaped like a butterfly essentially. So the interior portion, where the head end portion of the car parks, is the lower end of the solar panel. It lifts out, so all the drainage would sheet to our existing stormwater system, which I'll speak to. But that's among the proposals right now, is to include solar in both the parking lot and on the rooftop. Again, just a real quick diagram of the building massing. We've got the 22,000 square foot building, loading dock in the rear. There's trash back there as well. Low roof overhangs, again, creating a real pedestrian environment here. A standalone shade shelter. Again, just an opportunity to have some seating outside of the weather if the temperatures are right, and then extending out into an outdoor seating area with picnic tables and whatnot for the restaurant. Snow storage, real quickly. I'll maybe a little out of order. Let me do this one first. Again, circulation, just highlighting the pedestrian connection, main pedestrian connection to the front entrance. This entire side of the building is proposed to include, you know, a widened sidewalk, both to facilitate, shoppers coming in and out of the store, but also outdoor displays, carriages, those kinds of things. Part of this project also includes extending a sidewalk from this main entrance down through the realignment of Lyman Street and down to the O'Neill intersection. Currently, there's a crosswalk that comes across Route 10 at that signalized intersection. It ends at an accessible ramp on the other side of the street. So we're proposing to extend the sidewalk across that side of the road to reconnect with that crosswalk. Again, just as a way to help facilitate, safe pedestrian movement into the site. Stormwater management, again, this lies with the Conservation Commission in terms of their jurisdiction, but I'll just talk about some of the major components just to make you aware. Currently, the existing site, 3/4 of it drains, including the parking lot and most of the existing building, drain to catch basins without sumps that are collected in a pipe system that discharge to the existing head wall that's there that partially feeds this wetland. So what we are doing is taking all the roof water and depositing that into large, shallow detention areas that will absorb, the water from the roofs only. It's not dirty water. We don't need to treat it the same way as we do the storm water or the parking lot water. I'm sorry. So those will be in large, shallow basins, a foot or two deep, is what they are. But they're really intended to spread out water over a large, surface area, thus enabling us to, handle a large volume of water in these storms. Right now, there's an existing low point for the site out at the edge of the roadway in the parking lot in front of Captain Jack's. We're going to retain that just because it's really difficult to eliminate that low spot on the site entirely and have the road and everything else still work. So we are retaining a drain inlet there for emergency overflows. Most of the larger storms will be, regular storms will be handled with the on-site infrastructure, but in the event that we get some larger storms, discharge that safely. The parking lot, as I said, all of the parking lot runoff is being directed to these channels. These are stone filled channels with a perforated pipe. The parking lot sheet flows to these swales. So any runoff that either lands on the parking lot and or the solar carports will end up in this drain trench. We've got a 4-foot deep line trench because groundwater is particularly high in this location. And so, not wanting to discharge water that immediately runs off parking lots into the groundwater was something that we were trying to avoid. So we've got a liner in there to, help capture that, treat that according to the Mass DEP standards, stormwater standards. That's all collected in a pipe system, and we do have a larger treatment chamber here, again, to satisfy any of those other, miscellaneous areas that might not get, the treatment that they're required through other means. We've got a small basin out here. I've got some images of what we're envisioning out here, but the idea is, a low stone wall with a small rain garden-esque feature in front of it is sort of a doorstep to the entrance of the market, and an opportunity for some landscaping behind and whatnot, but it becomes also a landscape element as well as a stormwater feature. And then a large swale, broad swale in this existing grassed hillside on the north side of the wetlands. So, snow storage, again, we are going to be a little bit limited on the site due to some of these carports, but I think particularly in these locations on the outside of the parking lots, there will be some opportunity to push snow through the stanchions that support the carport. Again, we don't have nor do, I think some of the snow removal companies have a lot of experience pushing snow below carports. I know it's doable, and I know they do it at UMass. So I think, initially the proposal will be we've got, plenty of space along that outside edge to try and push snow, as far as we can. There are some areas that are unencumbered by other structures. We've got a location here. There's, a strip of island that separates the loading dock from the larger parking lot. And there's some larger spaces out front that certainly can accommodate some snow storage, obviously during larger storms. Just like, a lot of other facilities will have to coordinate trucking, snow off-site to another location. That's just the way it is in New England. Storm management, water and sewer. Again, these are fairly simple. We're going to be bringing in a new water service from Route 10 from the existing 12-inch line. Again, we're working with the engineering department through all these details. Sewer connection will be retained essentially in its same location, which ties into Lyman Street. But we'll do all that work as part of that realignment. Site lighting, so there's a few things proposed, and one thing I do want to mention is, so this photometric plan was done with the idea that we'd have larger site lights similar to this. We really hadn't entertained the notion of the solar carports when this photometric plan was done. I think we've all acknowledged that with the solar carports there, it will hinder the ability for pole lights to really do their job effectively. So. I think one of the things I'd like to suggest is that we would propose to update this, and I think what the proposal would be was to light from beneath the canopies where we can, the solar canopies where we can. I think it'll bring the light level down a lot further. We can certainly get enough distribution on the site for vehicle and pedestrian safety. With that said, we would intend on submitting a revised photometric plan, but obviously with the overall goal of limiting, light spill beyond the property line. We are at 0-foot candles. With this plan, I imagine that any revisions, with the lights as I discussed would, further reduce any potential light spill. There are some building-mounted lights, both for egress and for pedestrian safety. We've also got a zone out in the front of the store, as I mentioned, that cafe space where we envision string lights, similar to what's in Pulaski Park in Northampton. Those aren't shown on here just because of the level of lighting that they produce, and it does start to get a little complicated on the plan. They're not very high intensity lights, but if it's something the board requests we add to the plan, we can certainly add those. But it does start to get. They are on this one? Okay, all right. Okay. To my point, yes, thank you, Tom.
What I don't see is lighting for the Captain Jack's area. Is that changing at all?
So the existing pole lights that are there now are going to be removed. There will be a pole light, I think, or a small residential scale light that we will put back out there. It was something that came up in a discussion a week or two ago. So there will be a post-style light out there in conjunction with the string lights. I think will be the main source of lighting for the outside area. Signage, again, we're proposing one sign one freestanding sign at the street in conjunction with that landscape wall. It'll be something very similar to their existing sign in Northampton. With sized accordingly to meet the sign regulations of the zoning bylaw, but this is a representative image of what we anticipate constructing out there. And then just a few images just to give you an idea of sort of what we're trying to represent. They're a little bit difficult to see with the lighting, but with the cafe space outside, the idea that we have some stone Gabion style seating with some locally sourced lumber on top to help define that space. We've got some, I can go back to the site plan, but we're envisioning some low landscaping behind that to really help protect sort of the pedestrian zone from the vehicles on Route 10. Most of the plantings outside of that area. Site plan quickly. So the Gabion benches and whatnot that I'm speaking to now are really along this edge. Some small ornamental trees, again, just to create a pedestrian scaled environment and help separate the pedestrian area from the vehicular traffic on Route 10. But all of this area out here is proposed to be a wildflower pollinator meadow planting that would grow 18, 24 inches high, but it would provide a real nice soft corner to that intersection. And again, I think provide somewhat of a barrier for pedestrians to want to cross that meadow into Route 10. So these gabion benches, again, around the idea of string lights on poles, and then this is an image. There's a Florence bank at Five Corners, a very similar wall and stormwater system similar to what is being proposed at the front of this store. Again, it's a low Goshen stone wall with landscape feature in front with grasses and rain garden-esque plants. But it also functions as a stormwater element. And I'll turn it over to Tom. I don't know.
So my name is Tom Douglas. My architecture firm is in Northampton. I work with this where you guys.
And I have a lot of these in this slideshow as well.
Can you bring it up just a little closer on the podium? I can't quite catch it. Thank you.
Oh, that was
Opportunity, yeah.
It's interesting.
I can lower this thing. I can give it. My architecture firm is in Northampton. We have done a lot of building renovations, done quite a few restaurants, hotels, and we were the architects for the River Valley Market renovation in Northampton. So they built the store with the original architect there on, as you know, a very difficult, tight site. So basically had to blast out a lot of rock. It's a much easier site to work on. A lot of great benefits to this site. But I just wanted, in terms of the site planning, I just wanted to take a step back to try to give you an idea of what some of our original thought process was and how the building ended up where it is on the site. But the first thing we wanted to do was recognize the fact that the building is a former agricultural site. And so we wanted to try to preserve as much green space as we possibly could on that site. And as you know, a typical grocery store would have a sea of parking in front of it, and you'd see the building across that sea of parking, and it would be in the back. We could easily have done that right here, but what we really wanted to do was to surround the building, like I said, with as much green space as possible. I'll go back to the site plan. So we did a couple of things. You got the wetlands on the left here. That is a nice green space as you approach from Easthampton. We oriented the parking as a big rectangle facing that way rather than across the site like that. And then we tried to take this building and push it as far back into the site as we possibly could for a couple of different reasons. First, we wanted to have a big green space out in front of the building that was both an outdoor cafe, pedestrian pathway area, and lots of green planting out in front of it so that you would, as you're coming from Northampton, you look across a green space and you see the store behind it. The other thing we were thinking about was that we wanted to push the building back as far as we could to make space for Captain Jack's, because if we could easily have just put the parking lot in the back, and building in the back, parking lot in the front, and it just would have been a very different experience. So we pushed our building back as far as we could, related it to Captain Jack's, surrounded it by a nice green space that's a pedestrian-friendly area, and shows a lot of activity and community space happening in front of that building that will draw you in. So just to walk you through the circulation, you'd come in here, you'd park, and the main entry to the building is right here. So we're trying to provide a lot of pedestrian space right here because, as you know, grocery stores have lots of bins and Christmas trees and all kinds of things out in front. They crowd that space, so we're trying to recognize that fact and get a big pedestrian space here. We've got a space down here that you can kind of see in this aerial rendering. I mean, this actually, you can see a lot of things a lot better, but that's the building. This is the pedestrian space out that cafe area where you can spill off from the interior of the cafe, and then we have a space out here which I just pointed to in the site plan, that could accommodate a food truck or something like that that would be parked right next to the front door. So really something to enliven that space and bring people into it, have them be inside and outside. Let's see, so just in terms of statistics, the building's, Jeff said 22,000 square feet roughly. It's got a tall raised entry area, so that spot, that part of the building that's off in the corner here, it's raised, that's right where the main entry is, and then a vestibule there. Let's see, there's a sections, here's the plan. So again, entry right here, vestibule, you would take a left, go to the produce, you go through the meat department, come all the way around to the deli area, and then these are all the checkout counters right here. So you'd make this loop all the way around, and then the grocery shelves are right in the middle. You check out here, and then this whole section right along here is cafe space. There's a community room there, and then there's a big public cafe there. In the back we've got bathrooms and some offices, and this is kitchen here. There's a loading dock in the back right there.
The
So
question
that's where all of our
is there an
deliveries-
exterior access point for the cafe space to the outdoor seating?
Yeah, there's,
Where are those?
Pardon?
Where?
So the idea is that there'll be a lot of windows and doors right along this wall here.
Thank you.
And you can see that a little bit better on this drawing here. You can see that's the entry right there. The cafe space is behind here, and then this is the windows and doors. And we're thinking about the possibility of having something like a big glass garage door that you could throw open and people could come and go.
Just for a point of reference, this is 22,000 square feet. How big is the existing store, roughly?
About 18,000 square
Okay.
feet. So one of the things that we're doing with the store, you can see these funny little bumps on the outside. Those are walk-in coolers. So those will be mounted on a concrete pad, and they'll be immediately adjacent to the building structure. The building structure, the formal building structure, is what you see in yellow there. And it's a single-story building. Roof is about 18 feet. Ceiling's going to be about 16 feet on the inside. We're really going to try to make an effort to make as energy conscious a building as we possibly can. It'll be insulated above and beyond the building code. It'll be airtight and sealed. It'll have all energy efficient lighting, LED lighting, as much sustainable materials as we possibly can have. So
Is there office space in there somewhere?
there is some office space in the back here. So if you know the Northampton store, they have a mezzanine space where the office is on. We just, in this, decided, since we had a little bit more space, we didn't want to have an elevator and an extra stair and make people go up and down. It was much easier to put the offices on the first floor. So, and then the people on the first floor, the office people, can go outside and enjoy being outside. So.
The walk-in coolers, are those are accessible from inside the store though, is that right?
Only from the inside
Okay.
of the store. They'll have that typical metal skin,
Yeah.
metal clad insulated panel that goes around an exterior walk-in, and it'll have a roof. The roof of the building is high on this side, and it's going to be a very gentle slope to the back. It's essentially a flat roof with a very slight pitch to the back. So all the water that comes off the roof of that building is going to go back here to a really large gutter, and then it'll go into the ground from there.
What kind of roof?
It's a membrane roof, like a TPO. We're going to try to cover that roof with as many solar panels as we can, so besides the solar panels in the parking lot, those carport type structures that Jeff talked about, we're just going to cover the roof of this structure with solar panels.
I think
So,
just while I'm thinking of it, I think that's something that we're going to need more detail on, is the solar aspect. I think there's some question about whether or not we need to give an actual solar permit. It occurred to me as I was going through it that that part of it isn't much different than what we've been doing, but I think we should probably check the bylaws, and Alan, maybe you have an opinion on that too, but I would rather just get out in front of that instead of not taking the time to do it. But so sort of what we're talking about on the roof and what we're talking about in the parking lot, and down to kilowatts and all that stuff, so we can sort of figure out what's going on and make sure we check all our boxes on that.
Location transformers.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we're not creating an independent solar array. The rooftop solar panels really will be essentially invisible from the street.
Yeah.
Because they're behind a parapet wall.
And the idea is just to serve the property, or is there going to be excess power you might be able to sell back?
Just to serve the property.
Okay.
And then the,
It's a large amount of space, though, if you cover that entire roof and the carports. I mean, it seems to me you could generate a lot of solar.
Not enough to run the whole store, but
Oh, really?
it's significant, yeah.
Quick on the solar, there is a threshold in the ordinance, so we started to kind of flesh this out recently, but under 100 kilowatts would qualify it as a small system that doesn't require a special permit. Over 100 kilowatts would bump it into a special permit category. We think that this special permit proceeding could encapsulate the necessary approval that the planning board needs to make. So it's just going to be clarifying the size, which will dictate whether, basically it's going to amount to probably another hour of discussion at some other point about going through the solar bylaw findings. But we may be able to not have to do that if it's small enough.
Well, we have
in terms
two
of
people
kilowatts.
in the audience, Jonathan, Wright, and Gary, who you guys have been researching the solar end of this. Do you know how many kilowatts this might produce?
I don't want to throw the show off if you've got a routine, but
No, that's fine. Jonathan Wright is, Wright Builders is going to be the general contractor.
We have our own routine. Thank you very much. So the expanse of solar, it would be a grid-connected system, and the preliminary sizing is around 575 kilowatts.
Okay.
The building is proposed to be not entirely combustion-free, but close. So we'll be cooking with gas, but we're looking at a building that could support heat pump and heat recovery throughout, supported by the solar. So we're seeing that solar being about 65%, maybe a little more, depending on the operations.
Okay.
And you just said 575 milliwatts being just over half of, well below our criteria for needing to consider it.
Well,
Or 5 times your requirement.
Yeah,
Five
it's
times.
5 times. Yeah.
Okay. I would go 500.
Hold on, one more question here.
Yeah, where you getting your gas from?
It's propane,
Oh, okay,
in a truck.
all right. I know there's a ban on,
From Kansas.
You can't put it no customers. Okay.
So we will have to walk through it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Sorry you can't see this very well. That's the view from Route 10. But you're mostly seeing that raised section, where you enter, and then this is all the glass on the side wall, and then canopies and sunshades that.
Is that elevated above the street level? Am I seeing that right? Is the idea that it's up a little bit, or is that
No,
depth that I'm just
you're
seeing in the shading?
Like
It looks higher, but.
meadow grasses that are about this high, so it's not elevated
Okay.
at all.
Gives it the optical.
This you can see a little
Should be
bit
quite a
better.
thing when it's done.
But we really are making an effort to
That's really good.
preserve Captain Jackson, create a seamless sort of outdoor space linking the two so that you can come and go. Obviously, if you're going to Captain Jack's, you got to park over here, but you're going to walk through this canopy area and then go over here to a much more wide open space, and then surround with as much greenery as we can here to buffer it from the street and also create a more rural-like setting.
Is the idea that there'll be spots earmarked for Captain Jack's, or is it just going to be full lot of?
Spots?
Yeah.
No, there's a couple spaces behind him
Yep.
that are accessible, but there won't be any earmarked spots.
And they're paved, those handicap accessible spots, correct?
Yes, they're paved.
They are paved, but it's gravel up to those paved spots. And that meets ADA? That meets
Yes,
ADA?
as long as there's a paved, accessible roof, parking to where they're headed.
Okay, but there are curb cuts for those 2 access points, right? Onto,
Yes.
okay.
Lyman.
Onto Lyman,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's any curbs on that side of the street.
Okay.
I'm sure it's at some point in your presentation, so it doesn't have to be now, but I'd love to hear more about the relationship with Captain Jack's.
Can you be more specific?
Are they going to be renting from you?
Yes.
Do you have a long-term contract?
Being developed.
Are they represented here?
Don't know.
Okay.
There's your answers.
That was
There
quick.
you have it, yeah.
Here it goes.
So one other little quickie thing about Captain Jack's that we didn't touch on is they do have 2 curb cuts existing. And Jeff's been working extensively with DOT. And so those 2 curb cuts are not really in favorable spots for DOT. They like the fact that we're gonna, put our curb cut way down here at the end. They basically have told us that if we want another curb cut on Route 10, it needs to be opposite the gas station entrance. So that would put, and it needs to be this one down here, so that would put that curb cut pretty far away from Captain Jack's. So, like I said, we've made a lot of effort to keep that building and the outdoor dining spaces visible, nice, exciting. What we can't accommodate in this plan is the parking in front of Captain Jack's. It's just basically impossible to do that. And if we did, it would be, that's the reason that I wanted to bring up what our original site planning goals were, which was to put as much green space out there in front of the building, signify the old agricultural rural area, but also just buffer it from the street and have it be a nice looking area instead of looking across a big parking lot. So those are, the guiding principles that we've had. We feel like we've done as much as we possibly can to seamlessly connect those 2 businesses and make them both be successful and share in the excitement that's going to happen on that outdoor space. So, that's the front entry? Yes.
That access point from Lyman Street, is that currently paved?
Which one? There's 2 along there.
So the one that's furthest away from Route 10 is.
It is?
The others, there aren't any others there now.
The one back here is paved. Is that
Correct.
Yeah.
And the near one is, if I heard right, it's going to be for emergency access or for, I guess, the accessible parking spots behind Captain Jack's. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, so you can see there's one right, here's the entry for the back delivery area. Here's that emergency access right there.
There's been a little discussion you don't know about. We met with Kevin from Captain Jack's yesterday and discussed in the fire lane whether it be possible to have a couple of short-term, like for pickup, parking spaces. And I know that he talked to the fire department, and we're looking at seeing it, exploring to see if we could make that work, and that would be changed. That would
So
be
that
changed
parking
later.
area is still sort of.
It's not it wouldn't be really a parking area. It would be a couple. It would be a
Pickup
couple of
spots.
spaces along that
Gravel.
the gravel.
Yeah.
That would be like real short term, just for pickup, and so we're totally open to doing that if it's feasible and if it's okay with the fire department. So I just wanted to add that just happened. So
Yep.
Tom didn't get in on that.
Understood.
Can I ask one question about the upper delivery portion of Lyman Street there? And I remember reading in the traffic study that it was designed to not allow a left turn. Is that correct? Did I read that correctly?
So what we tried to do is the idea is that trucks would pull off of Lyman Street, and then have the ability to back up to the loading dock. And the curb cut is generous enough on the easterly opening to allow trucks to pull out and around onto Lyman. We tried to narrow this down as much as possible and constrict that as much as possible. Can smaller trucks turn around and weave around that? Probably. But it's a function of just the geometry and the alignment. We certainly tried to make it much more difficult for especially the larger trucks to weave through there.
So you did design it to, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, finish it.
I was going to say, you did it sort of intentionally try to
We
design
did do
it
it
to
intentionally.
prevent a big truck
This has
like
got a
that turn.
5 or 6 foot radius. This is a much larger one.
And is that not going to be available for a public exit?
It will be available.
Okay.
I think, one of the things we recognize is that you know, having cut-through traffic isn't desirable. So that was one of the reasons we introduced the raised crosswalks, some of the other pedestrian zone features, the stamped asphalt and whatnot, just to try and discourage, you know, vehicles. But it will be available for.
And so it's not restricted left turn in the sense that you're not gonna have signage there that says no left turn or anything like that?
I think the intent is, in at least the initial discussions that we've had with the DPW, is that combined with some potential signage that they may include along Lyman Street, discouraging truck traffic, you know, up Lyman Street, that it may work in concert with a sign there on River Valley property that would, you know, say right turn only.
Okay.
For trucks anyway.
For trucks at least, okay.
Yes.
And can you talk a little bit about the realignment, as it's called, for Lyman Street?
Finish my note real quick. So right now, as you know, the Lyman Street intersection meets Route 10 at this real acute angle. And so one of the things it does is it makes, you know, particularly turning south on Route 10 particularly difficult. But it's just, it's not an ideal alignment from either, you know, the city standpoint or from DOT's standpoint. Similar to what was done, at Florence Road further down, you know, realigning those two streets is something that they really want to do. They haven't had the ability to do it here because they don't have the land. So with this project, we have the ability to provide some land to realign those roadways that doesn't hinder what we're trying to do with the site, and at the same time create a, you know, much safer alignment. So what we're doing is, you know, obviously providing a new alignment, proposing a new alignment that intersects at a 90-degree intersection like they prefer. The driveway for the medical center needs to get extended a little bit. There is a couple of drainage structures that need to be relocated, but essentially the drainage system and you know, what's going to it stays the same. And just the addition of the crosswalks and sidewalk to the site is all going to be part of that same effort.
And so, I mean, we don't have anything to say over that, right? So DOT has to deal with Route 10 for the curb cut,
Right.
and the city, I assume the city council and with advice from the DPW would deal with sort of the Lyman Street component of that. We would just approve the site plan, but
Land acquisition
Correct.
through the city.
right, all of that.
Yeah.
And so, is any of this contingent on this happening? Do we need to wait for that to happen before this would be a go, or?
So this is one of the things.
Or do you need the
before
permit to
about-
actually get DOT?
So we've got 3 permits with DOT, and the reason for that was that the part of it has to do with timing in their process. So for them to review and approve some of the curb cut openings along Route 10, specifically the closing and widening of some, is a much easier process for them. It's you know, fairly straightforward. The realignment needs to go to their design team just to look at alignments and offsets and that kind of thing. But we anticipate that would be more intimately tied to this site plan approval, this special permit, because of the truck traffic. That's the reason we are proposing that is you know, being part of this project. The widening is something that they certainly want to pursue. We are pursuing that as a separate permit because, again, it's going to take a longer design review process on their end, and depending on final construction budgets, don't want to impinge the potential for this to move forward if that doesn't happen. It's not a requirement according to the traffic study, that left turn lane. They've acknowledged that there's a timing issue at the O'Neill intersection, which is causing the majority of the delays. Aaron Fredette from McMahon is here also, who did the traffic study for this in Cumberland Farms.
Can you just explain, you've mentioned a couple times the widening and the left turn lane thing, so can you just explain, especially to people who maybe haven't looked through all the documents?
So these plans show it a little bit better. So the idea right now, there's an existing sidewalk on the east side of Route 10, on the Cumberland Farms side. There's also a number of utilities, utility poles along that street edge. So we fortunately have enough property on our side of the site to accommodate a widening of that road, which would include a dedicated left turn lane. So for vehicles driving north on Route 10, you'd have the ability to shift over into a middle lane and wait for a dedicated left-hand turn. and that would allow traffic to, bypass that center lane and also to allow traffic to continue in a single lane.
So that's actually reflected on that plan there,
So
right?
that's shown on this plan, yes. They're shown on various plans.
And that lane is what, 3 car lengths, 2 car lengths?
It's probably 2 or 3 car
Okay.
lengths, sure. And so with the understanding that DOT is going to take a little bit more time to review this, the length of, particularly with some of these striped tapers and how they relate to the Cumberland Farms intersections and whatnot is something that they're certainly going to want to be a part of, but this isn't required based on the traffic study, so it's something that they want to propose, but we're going to do that as a separate permit with them to isolate that.
Getting back to the timing with DOT, is it something where you would want this special permit before they start looking at it, or is it something where you want DOT to approve it before you decide whether we're going forward, or might your plans change if they don't approve it? Or
I don't have too many concerns about DOT.
Okay.
Personally, we've met with them 3 or 4 times already. They've looked at,
they're
design
eager to get.
development.
You said they're eager to have that intersection.
They want that
Yep.
realigned, and they're willing to do, whatever it takes on their end to
I don't know
get
if you
this done.
stated this, but is there a date you expect to hear from them with a resolution?
We've actually got the permits ready to go. There's been a lot of different pieces, all coming together. But we met with them last week just to make sure that we were all on the same page. We were originally thinking it would be 2 permits. They wanted 3 just for land ownership purposes and the way some of the transfers need to happen. So we needed to split those apart to 3 permits, but we've got 3 that'll be submitted this week. Again, we've met with them with 75% development drawings last week, and they really didn't have too many concerns.
And I assume we've discussed with the city the sort of acquisition and the movement on their end, so we don't think there's a problem there. Is that fair?
I
Or is
presume
there-
so. I don't. Yeah, we haven't talked specifically
Okay.
with the mayor council any about it, but we've certainly had discussions with the planning department and with Joe and Dan and from the DPW about what's going to
Okay.
happen.
Okay.
Can I throw a big question into the whole traffic thing?
Why don't
You
go
can, but
go
can
for
I
it.
just
You go
ask a
for it.
question
Yeah,
first?
go
I've
for
got
it.
several questions about the site plan.
Yeah.
Do we want to make traffic a separate thing?
Yeah,
Go
Or
save it.
before
It's
we
a
get
big
into
one.
traffic? Because I don't want to get too down this rabbit hole before asking.
Go for it.
All right.
You got a water question, don't you?
I do. I at least one. All right, so you went to the Concom, and are they're going to require a stormwater report?
We did submit a stormwater management plan.
Okay.
That's being reviewed under a stormwater permit. Yes.
Okay, good. And a question about that, and what were their, did they have any concerns about snow removal in the buffer zone of the wetlands?
They talked about, where snow would be stored,
Yeah.
and where flows would potentially go. In the 2 locations that we've got shown, one of the things you'll notice is at least this location here, below the solar panels, falls
In the
right in
yeah.
that drainage, the
It
stormwater
makes no
feature.
sense. You got a retention basin, snow
Well,
removal, and solar panels.
it's a grass, shallow grass basin, swale.
Okay.
So there's no reason, these solar panels would sit on, on posts above the ground, like any other, ground-mounted solar array, which get maintained all the time. I mean, they can, there's nothing preventing anybody from mowing or weed whacking under them.
Anyway.
Pardon?
To the
The
retention
snow's
basin.
gonna slip right off them.
And the snow would slip right off the carports onto the ground anyway, right?
Because
Okay.
I know they slip off mine onto mine.
So, I just have a question about the pedestrian walkway that leaves the building and goes between the first bank of parking spaces, and then it crosses over. Where do pedestrians go from there? Do they walk into the wetlands, or where are they walking?
I think part of the goal was to
It
try
looks
and
like it.
encourage folks to,
Go
if they
fishing.
don't want to sit at the cafe, they can certainly walk out there with a sandwich and a roll. I mean, it's a nice place to sit.
It is,
You're
it's pretty.
sitting on a grass bank on along the edge of a wetland with beautiful views of Mount Tom. So just to provide and encourage people to explore other parts of the site, I think was really the goal of that.
But you're not gonna mow that anymore, right?
Well, there's going to be, there's going to be a maintenance program which entails mowing around that stormwater.
Just around
feature.
the edge though,
Right,
but
but not the wetlands.
The
Yeah,
wetlands
we're not
themselves
going
are
to mow the wetlands. No, the
become
wetlands
overgrown.
remain.
Yeah, the
Right.
wetlands.
No, that's
But it
part of
doesn't
the-
connect to like another sidewalk or anything that would continue out. It's just for site only.
It is, and that's something that one of the discussions that we've had with DOT. Let's go back to the larger site plan because you can see, one of their big pushes recently has been, strengthening pedestrian connections,
Right.
including sidewalks, complete streets. The issue at this site, as we pointed out, is this gets particularly steep the further south you go toward that culvert crossing. Then we hit that culvert crossing. There's no ability to put a sidewalk in there across to the other side anyway. They acknowledge that it's a challenge that they are having on their end because one department is dictating certain. They pointed to several other locations in other towns where they've made applicants run a sidewalk along the entire frontage of the property, even though the sidewalk ends in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So it's
we've
something
we've certainly done that in Easthampton. I think the idea is that when you have someone in front of you and you can get some sidewalk put in, you do. And then
Yes.
hope that the neighbor will be back in front of you another time.
We're
right?
certainly not adverse to
Right.
strengthening pedestrian connections. It's more the challenge of what do you do when you
Right.
get to this corner. There's no.
It may
way to
never
tell.
be able to tie into anything else.
Right.
So that.
And so, we'll work with them and do whatever they need. It may mean that we end up with a sidewalk along there, but
Nothing
they acknowledge
simple
the fact
with
that it really isn't a practical
Okay.
thing to do.
Harry?
Yeah, what are you gonna do about mosquito control up there? You got all this water all over the place and people be sitting outside and you got wetlands all over.
The water,
Do
there'll
anything
be
with
standing
that?
water in those areas immediately after and for a short period after, major storm events. They're intended to dry out fairly quickly. There are overflow features in there to prevent the water from getting to a depth too deep for the groundwater to absorb it within, 72 hours, 48 hours.
Alright.
But it's a large open, they won't
Thought I
be,
just asked it.
Yeah.
That's good, Harry. Good question. All right. Do we want to do traffic?
Are we really done with stormwater? That was so fast.
No, they're doing it. Concom's doing it after.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're not done with anything
Let them
yet,
do it.
Jeff.
Let
I
them
just
do it.
have one
Yeah,
point of curiosity. I want to make sure that Concom gets back to us on that. Is that I know that these kinds of things, and especially this area, I've had people over the years come to me specifically on this site about a fear of ramifications further down on the other side of the street, down lower, and what filling this in, what treating it inappropriately might do. And I know there's a lot of bituminous surface already in the area that you're dealing with, and you're not really changing that. Actually, it seems to me like you're adding more.
There's
drainage.
actually less impervious area overall.
Exactly.
But, yeah.
So I mean, that's going to mean more runoff is going in, and it's going to be handled better, and so it should be a better outcome to the neighbors further down the line. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, so two things.
Okay.
One, currently stormwater is completely untreated and just is piped directly to that outlet into the wetlands.
Currently, that's the state.
Currently,
right?
that's
Yeah.
the situation, right. So there's half a dozen, I'll guess, catch basins on the site, plus the majority of the roof water that are all directed right toward that head wall. And, it's a hard connection. There's no deep sumps. If there are, they're completely filled in and some, So, this plan does two things. One, rather than dumping everything into single structures, we're trying to spread out the watersheds for the various drainage areas. So all these individual swales have the ability to absorb. They're going to be stone with a gravel infill again to treat the storm water. There's another treatment element right before this discharge. So we're going to try to spread it out into all these small little puddles all over the site, where we can, because it's relatively flat. And again, we don't have a lot of depth because of the high groundwater. So we're going to try to spread out as much as we can into shallow, smaller areas, which will also allow us to store a little bit more and release it at a slower rate. So we're going to, the outlet here, we're not increasing stormwater flows out of there, whatsoever. We are decreasing some of the flows. There's another, so all of this stormwater that currently comes out of this wetland eventually continues on through that wetland system and through that culvert. There's another small system, like I mentioned, the catch basin at Captain Jack's now and around the Lyman Street, that comes across the street to another outlet in a small channel on the other side of the street. Same situation. Currently, it's all untreated. No sump catch basins. We're going to clarify all that and bring it up to standards.
It looks like there's actually more impervious area, but it looks like they're managing the stormwater better.
Well, okay.
So, but I haven't seen the report.
All right. I very much trust his opinion.
On the stormwater. Transportation, you're on your own.
Yeah.
You ready for my bomb?
All right. Well, do we want to have the
Save it for
traffic?
another day?
Well, no. I mean, I'm comfortable going to 8:30 if we do.
I only have one point I want to make in it. There's a million questions I have, but there's one big one. On page 30 of this traffic study, which I made it to. It's in the first sentence. It says the proposed River Valley market development includes an 18,000 square foot market. Of course, that stood out to me and made me think, uh-oh, this amazing traffic study I just went through might have been based on an earlier design and isn't taking into account 4,000 square feet of the building. And you've got 121 new, 125 for the weekends for peak hour. It's a lot in there, and this really was something I paid a lot of attention to, because there's anecdotal evidence and there's your evidence, and I really like following empirical evidence, your evidence. But anecdotally, I know I've spent a lot of time trying to get out of Lyman Street and onto Route 10. And that F rating or E rating, whatever, for O'Neill, I've experienced it personally. So this is something I want to take seriously. So is this traffic study legit?
So, yeah, I mean, to your point, it was legit for an 18,000 square foot store.
Okay.
It did get expanded with some of these, additional walk-in coolers, some of these, some of the ancillary space that got added on afterwards. So there was an increase in the foot size that didn't get reflected in that report, correct?
Okay. Before you start, though, and talk about it, I just have one more thing. I really would like you to address the fact that you say there are existing site trips up for Captain Jack's, and you talk about peak hour weekday and Saturday and midday, and you've got, a total of 75 site trips for Captain Jack's. Then you say you have River Valley market trips will be an additional 272 trips, and then for some reason you minus out the Captain Jack's for an additional trips total of 197. It makes no sense, because at Captain Jack's, that assumes Captain Jack's then is leaving. So we need to address that for your total counts.
So for the record, Erin Fredette with McMahon Associates, and the two items that you gentlemen have raised are two developments that have come up since we had completed the original study. So
This is the Easthampton Planning Board.
So both of your assumptions are correct. It doesn't make sense, given the current plan, to take out the Captain Jack's trips, and that it doesn't reflect the 22,000 square feet.
Okay. Okay. So that'll be updated. Good.
All right, I got a question.
Okay.
Yeah, in your professional opinion, how is this going to affect the traffic in Northampton?
Well, so we conducted a full traffic impact study that you have in front of you, and we looked at the weekday afternoon peak hours and the Saturday midday peak hours, because that's when we would expect traffic both on Northampton Street as well as the site to be generating at its highest. So essentially creates a typical worst case scenario, expecting that other times of day, like 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 10 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday, are not going to be as bad as what we document in our report. So at the intersection of Lyman Street, the project site driveways, we anticipate those to operate acceptably. Level of service C or better. The way we look at capacity analysis is essentially a grade system A through F, A being very little delay, F being much higher delay. And so the unsignalized site driveways are shown to operate okay. Where we do see some issues is at the O'Neill Street intersection, and those issues are without the project. Those are something that's going on today. We'll continue with the other development that we document in our study in the area. But we did identify that there are potential timing changes that can be implemented that won't erase all of the traffic worries at that traffic signal.
You've said that several times. What does that mean?
What does what
Are you
mean?
talking about timing in the lights?
Sure. So right now, there's 20 seconds for O'Neill Street to get out, and then it turns over to the southbound left turn, and then it turns over to the northbound and southbound. So those all have allotted periods of time within a cycle. And so what we can do is kind of tweak how much time each of those movements gets in order to improve the overall operations of the signal. And that's something that would have to go through DOT, and I think Jeff has noted that DOT recognizes that there's opportunity for improving that signal timing.
In our discussions with them, they acknowledge that the timing that exists on that light now is still the original timing from when they installed that several years ago. And they know there's a problem. They just haven't had the time or ability to get out here and redo it. So they know it's on their radar.
And one thing that I can do to clarify some of the discrepancies in the report is what I need to do is an analysis of the real retail area where the people are going to be, and then all the back-of-house spaces, because what Jeff just said, we did add a lot of back-of-house space, is true. So we can break down the square footage for you.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if this email got forwarded to you. We had a email from Robert Parent, who who is an Easthampton resident and is also the Holyoke City engineer, who raised a couple issues with the traffic report. Did you guys get a chance to look at that?
Yes. So
Okay.
I
I don't know if you have a response yet, but I just want to make sure you've seen it, because they seemed like valid points, at least at the outset.
Sure, yeah, and I think his first point was about how the first 30 pages really doesn't show any increase, and that's really in the appendix. I believe you have the appendix. If you don't, we'll get it to you, and certainly with anything that gets revised. But his concern was that the development was showing no increase, and that wasn't our intention. The development would have an increase. It's just specifically when the capacity analysis that we conduct shows movements of capacity, so there's more cars wanting to get through than physically can, which can happen in a future condition and is the case even without the project. Some of the limitations of the software start to overstate the increases in delay, which is why we show it the way we do. And you know, it's one of those things that we can certainly talk to. I've met Bob before, and we can certainly talk to Bob about. And his other concern, was regarding the study area.
Yeah.
And so we had looked at this study area for a couple reasons. First of all, just the proximity. Obviously, Lyman Street and O'Neill Street are very close in proximity, whereas the next signalized intersection at Florence, 3,000, 3,500 feet away, so it's a good distance away. Additionally, when we look at the percentage increase in traffic, the number he cited was about 20% increase, and that's for the total site trips, just looking at in comparison to Northampton Street, where in reality those trips are dispersing. You know, they're not all going in one direction on Northampton Street. There's a few that might go down Lyman, down O'Neill, north and south on Northampton. And so when we break all that out, looking at the new trips in comparison to Northampton Street, particularly where they go to the south, during the peak hours that we looked at, they were less than a 5% increase. And based on DOT guidelines, which is typically what we use for any impact study, no matter where it is in the Commonwealth, that 5% is kind of the threshold for whether or not you would look at an intersection. So since we were below that, we didn't pursue any intersections further to the south.
Okay. I mean, one of the things we're missing for the traffic discussion is that our own city engineer hasn't had a chance to provide feedback, so we'll have to wait, I guess, and see what he says too, and also probably not tonight, but at a future hearing when we hear from more of the neighbors and the public and other people that have questions or concerns about that, we can address that.
Certainly.
Jeff?
Just quick, I think if at a certain point along the way you could offer sort of a written response to what you just kind of explained would be helpful.
Absolutely.
It would be useful, I think, and then potentially consultation with the city engineer directly. He was away on vacation and the holidays were in the mix, so I think that would be very useful coming back at a continued meeting to continue to clarify the questions and issues. Okay.
Yep.
So I just want to say this, and I've been asking a lot of harsh questions. That's our job. We're going to do more of them. But I just wanted to make sort of an overview. I'm really concerned about what this is going to do for traffic. But everything else I've seen about this project, the changes you're making, look to me personally to be for the better. The changes you're making to Lyman Street, the view I think the public will have driving by and how that represents coming in Easthampton, because that's right at the border of Northampton and Easthampton. I think that's going to be a benefit and improvement to that area. The whole layout and design you've done personally, I think is expert and well done. And if everything else, all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed personally, I think it's going to be a great benefit to our city. So I just wanted to express that.
For add with respect to the project, before I open it up, I think for a little bit to see if there's public comment. Okay. So as I said, we're definitely going to have to continue this to another hearing. If everybody here wants to speak, some people are going to have to wait until next time. I apologize. You've been very patient all night. But we can start off. If anybody has any comments or questions and wants to come up to the podium, come on down.
Come on down.
All right.
Mr. Chair, would you maybe poll the number of people here to see if they desire to speak tonight?
Sure.
Like,
Can I just get a show of hands if you're considering speaking tonight? Or if you want to wait until next meeting, that's fine too. It's I don't want to force anyone.
It wasn't a large number.
Okay.
Just a few.
All right. So we'll see what we can do.
I'm one of the proprietors at Rainer Door on Lyman Street.
Could you start to get a little louder? I'm sorry.
Didn't hear you.
A question I have.
No, I'm sorry. Can you give your name one more time? We couldn't hear.
It's Peter Penitsko.
Okay.
With Rainer Door.
Oh, okay.
We're on Lyman. And
Okay.
you guys are talking about the traffic flow. Is that going to be handled at another meeting, or is it going to be discussed in flurry tonight? Or?
No. I mean, we're going to have to get in deep on that at a
because
future.
there's a lot of concerns with the traffic.
Yeah,
in
and
that
so
area.
I'm open to you,
Well, it's-
speaking about that now
what
and at
it
the
is,
next meeting.
It's the growth of Easthampton. I mean, if you try to come out of Lyman on any day from 3 to 5, taking a left turn is not happening.
Yeah.
It's just, the growth has just gotten crazy, and it's a problem with this coming up O'Neill, trying to take that left turn. And what we're finding is people go around, so the neighborhood are gonna get all the cars and traffic. They're gonna come out of River Valley and take a left.
What do you think of this, the new revised Lyman Street? Because one of the things I think that's hard right now
Oh,
is
I
you
think
can't
it's
make a
great,
left
except
or a
you
right.
can't take a left.
Right, but as it is right now, you can't do a left or a right, right? Because it's so hard. So
Take a right because the traffic light stops. You
yeah,
can make a right
it's
turn.
a tough angle though. It's hard for
I
people.
have trucks that go down that way,
Yeah.
but for the most part, they go around.
It's the left
So,
that's hard.
you know, the problem is gonna be the people, Buddy, you guys, you're gonna get a ton of traffic going left.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be, they're gonna all go left, and they've got in the back, it's set up for just the trucks coming in, but everyone in trying to get out of, on the 10, not gonna happen.
Yeah.
They're all gonna go the easiest, quickest way is gonna be the back way.
Yeah, it's
So
already
the
really hard.
road, Lyman and the streets on the other side are gonna get, probably traffic's gonna be crazy.
I mean, I
And-
think
and
it's
one of the problems with Valley, Valley Health, I mean, when they put the light in there, Easthampton Savings wasn't there, Valley Health wasn't there, Cumberland
Cumberland
Farms wasn't
Farms,
there,
yep.
so you've got this gigantic amount of businesses that's coming in and can't handle it. It's just like Jim was saying earlier on Cottage Street, no parking. Easthampton it's a good problem to have because business, everyone's coming from Northampton, and if you take out in front of River Valley in Northampton, there's always a cop out there.
yeah.
I mean, I live in Hatfield, so I go by there all the time, and there's a cop out there all the time trying to direct traffic. So, and to hear that it's 22,000 square feet and gonna have 75 people, and they get 150 with 18,000, something doesn't make sense. There's gonna be a lot more people working here, hopefully for their benefit. If they're putting all this money into the place, they're gonna wanna have more than 75 there if they've got 150 in Northampton. I mean, hopefully they're gonna grow it. And
Right, I
get-
think
get
that's
the
what they
business,
said,
so-
right? I
so
think
we're
that's
gonna bring
how
in
they
more
grew at the
traffic.
other
So
store,
that,
right.
To me, and the neighbors, that's gotta be a big concern. It really does, and I'm not, a Rotary, we hate to talk about a Rotary, but it's worked in a few other places, and there might be one needed at O'Neill. And you guys don't handle that, but somebody, it might be a thought process, just as driving into Easthampton, you're not gonna be able to get into Easthampton. But that's, my concern is the traffic. I think the design and everything is fabulous. It's great for the city, but that whole corridor where Valley Sports used to be, that's gonna get developed, that's on the market for, $1 million, and all around there is gonna be all developed, so I cannot see how someone's gonna take a left turn coming out of there going north. They're gonna go on Lyman and come down and then try to get out, or they're gonna go down to Buddy and around that direction. That's what's gonna happen. I mean, common sense. It's the path of least resistance, and that's the way they're gonna
Yeah.
go.
Well, we'll have to get into the next
Yeah,
meeting
it's
so we
just,
can talk
it's a
about.
concern, of mine and a
I
concern
mean,
that
I think
everyone should
Jim's
have.
right. I think it's pretty clearly the biggest
It is,
issue
yeah,
here, and we're gonna have to
absolutely,
address that. So
absolutely,
we'll get into that. All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks, guys.
Anybody else?
Wait till next week. Next meeting.
Yes, I am one of the residents of Lyman Street, Alex Kowalik. I live up on the upper end of Lyman Street. There is a truck exclusion on Lyman Street. This property is addressed Northampton Street. I see that they made their delivery entry off of Lyman Street. How is that working with, I understand they own property along Lyman Street, but the address is on Northampton. Does that excuse them from sending their trucks on Lyman Street? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe someone will fill that in at another meeting.
Yeah.
I didn't see any paperwork on the truck study that was done, or the traffic study that included Lyman Street. Was there an increase of traffic? Was that counted?
There is a traffic study that was done. I don't know if there's any copies over there that are left, but it's also online. It should be on the planning department website, right, Jeff?
Did they put counters out?
Most importantly, they said they're gonna redo that for the next meeting because of some things we just pointed out, so I would just wait till the new one comes out
I
to get
did
accurate.
not see any counters as far as traffic going across Lyman Street.
Okay.
So I don't know how the study was done.
Okay.
I was involved with the truck traffic going through, and there was intense traffic studies done. Numbers of cars, peak hours, off hours, weekends.
When was that?
15 years.
Okay.
15 years ago.
This
Took
was what,
11
April?
years to get that done.
The truck exclusion?
The truck exclusion.
Okay.
All right. And just because they put in their delivery entry in the back of the building instead of taking it off Northampton Street, are they thinking of allowing the trucks to come in from Lyman Street? Those are questions I would like to see answered.
Okay, that's a good question.
Right. And the traffic has already increased just because of the development of the Eastworks building, what's going to happen on Ferry Street, what's already happened with the Savings Bank, Boyle's buildings. Traffic
Cumberland
has
Farms, all
increased
that, yeah.
tremendously. The speed limit is 25 miles an hour up there. I know that has nothing to do with grocery stores, but things have to come under control before I think they should be allowed to configure whatever they're doing over there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
One more person tonight, maybe?
Excellent.
Patient and with a baby here. I'm impressed.
Good evening.
Bless
My
you.
name is Emily Lane, and I live on Parson Street here in Easthampton. I just want to express my support for this project. I'm really excited to see the site plans and to see cooperative business open in Easthampton that delivers fresh and local and organic produce and other groceries. And I also will say that I am a member of the board of the co-op. So, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I think we'll wrap up here. I'm sure applicant will want to respond to some of that traffic stuff, but I think it's best if we put that off till the next meeting. So I think based on, we discussed the traffic, what were some of the other issues that we had asked for more information on?
Solar.
Some of the, yeah, the details on the solar.
I want to hear the Conservation Commission's feedback on the stormwater report.
Right, we'll need to hear what Concom says whenever they issue their decision, and I guess we're also all waiting on DOT, although that may not happen before we're done, so.
So I guess procedural question, can we get this special permit approved with a condition that, we get whatever permits are required by DOT?
Yeah, I mean, I think that if that's the order that works best for you, we can do that. I mean, it sounds to me like the, I mean, I guess the question will be whether if it does, if the left turn lane doesn't get approved, if that impacts our decision about traffic or something like that. But I don't think we need DOT approval before we grant the special permit if that's all that's left. Do you disagree, Jeff?
No, I don't disagree. I think a couple of the items that come back up with traffic are just verifying, that the left turn lane on Route 10 is not required or triggered by the development. And so I think that's going to be, that's going to be something we hope to clarify through the city engineer. So if that can be clarified that it's not required based on the trip generation, then that would allow the planning board to proceed with approving the project without the Route 10 change. I think the Lyman Street intersection realignment, I think maybe at the next hearing we talk a little bit more about what that does. I think there was questions raised about whether trip generation on Lyman Street was calculated and what that actually means. So the realignment is item number 2, which could be some variability there. And then what I heard was some questions about the truck
exclusion on Lyman Street.
Yeah, I mean, it's really not, there's nothing specific about the current proposal on Lyman Street. It's customer entrance and exits, so I think that is sort of the last piece, but that's not really contingent upon Mass DOT, so it's kind of element number 3.
I mean, I guess as I'm thinking about the DOT stuff, I think these changes are really gonna have an impact on how we view the traffic, I think. So short of kind of showing us what would happen with the realignment and without, and we are comfortable with both kind of thing, I don't know that I mean, we don't need the DOT permit procedurally, but I think sort of logically that may be
Right. Well, so
helpful.
the one little complication with the Lyman Street realignment is sort of twofold. One is, you know, part of the understanding with putting the loading dock in the location that we're showing it is to, as pointed out, you know, truck traffic will need to partially be allowed to go up Lyman Street, and that was part of what I was speaking to before about discussions with DPW and engineering about site signage specific to, you know, this site and the operations here, that there would be no trucks allowed continuing up Lyman Street from this, you know, curb opening on. We can certainly clarify that with Dan and the city, but that was
yeah,
sort of
and
where that was
so
left.
this is the first I heard about the truck exclusion, and it's frankly the first I've dealt with a truck exclusion. So I don't think we can unilaterally waive that. I don't know if that's something that city council has to do. I assume that's the way it would go.
It
So
sounded like it was a city council thing.
okay, so I mean that would pretty clearly need to be something that gets done first, to the extent you're planning on using that for the delivery entrance, right? Because I don't think we can approve it if there's a truck exclusion.
We'll have to, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we'll have to start that. So, I mean, I don't know if you guys want to push this a little further down the road in the hopes that all of these can get you get all the ducks in a row and come back with everything, or if you want to push this out with the understanding that we would probably need another meeting after the next one. I think we can be pretty flexible with you guys as far as what your timeline is and all of that. I just want to make sure that I don't want you to come back too soon and not have what you need, or wait too long and you're sitting around.
I mean, the signage thing and the issue of the trucks exclusion, I think is certainly something that we need to understand a little bit more.
Yeah.
Insofar as relationship to the realignment specifically, they didn't have an interest insofar as the road alignment other than just the relocation of that curb opening and what's within their right-of-way. And so as long as that standard met with DOT's, you know, requirements, it really becomes a city issue.
Okay.
And that's again why they.
Which also, I don't know how long that process will be for sort of the acquisition and all of that, but I mean, I think probably we should at least get that lined up before we move forward with the rest of it.
Although I would say, I mean, that kind of realignment is something where it's shown on the planning board site plan, if it's approved, you know, it's the kind of condition that if there was some type of substantial change to the realignment in the future that changed an element of the project, it would have to come back. So there is a way to move forward with the planning board with the realignment shown on the plan, and then allow the city council process to unfold. And if something were to not work out or change substantially, then you might have to come back to the planning board for modification later.
Yeah, so I guess as long as we're sort of comfortable that DOT isn't going to object to it, and it's really just conditioned on the city process, then we can probably do that as a condition.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I was gonna say. And I'm not sure we want to go through the city process unless we know we're going to get a permit. Why would we go
I
through the
know.
permit
Well, that's the problem with all these things. You're sort of moving them all inching forward.
There's a lot of moving pieces here, and
well, that's why I asked if, you know, what part of this sort of our permit is holding up versus what are other things that you can get without us and then present to us. So I mean that.
Yeah, I think that much of this can just be conditioned because we're going to have a plan that's going to show a realignment of Lyman Street, and that's what we're going to have to build. If something happens and we can't build that, well, we're going to have to come back to you and explain what we plan to do.
And we'll have to reanalyze everything again if we have to do that. Yeah.
So
I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I was going to propose February 5th to make, because I think the city engineer was away. I think the city engineer could be having conversations with the project traffic engineer. I think it could be a good place to check in to make sure that the city engineer, if he has additional comments that may change the nature of the project, it might be worthwhile to have that conversation on the 5th if the applicant can be willing to coordinate.
So that's 3 weeks from tonight. Right. I mean, is that I guess that's probably enough time for you to sort of hopefully get comments from the city engineer and turn around some sort of response, or at least have a more in-depth discussion about the traffic issues.
Unless it's not, because we would go to the 19th if not 5th. Yeah.
So you wanted a week before the hearing.
Submissions are, I think, the Thursday before, right? So it would be, what did we just say, January 31st?
Or later if you need it.
Yeah.
But that's why I don't want to rush it, so we could do the 19th and give another 2 weeks in there. It's really up to you folks on that.
It depends on when we get the comments.
Right, that's the problem.
Yeah.
I mean, should we just say the 19th to be safe?
Later, yeah.
You might be better off with the 19th.
That works.
What's
Question for, yeah.
what's the timeline for Concom? Do you know?
We anticipate going back to them in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I think, you know, there were some questions that came from Dan with regards to stormwater. I think most of those questions, comments were fairly minor in nature. So we don't anticipate that it'll be, you know, too involved. So I would expect that within 2 weeks we might have it.
I would say February 19th makes sense to
Yeah.
give you guys
Concur.
plenty of time, but if you'd rather push it forward, we can do that.
I go with the 19th.
I think the 19th.
The 19th weeks.
Before I make a motion, is it okay if I just put a few things on their radar that are questions that I'm
Please.
gonna ask next? I don't want answers to these now, because we're tired. But these are questions I definitely wanna get answers to next time. The outside coolers, or the coolers that are on the side of the building, the walk-in coolers from the inside, I want a sense of how much noise those generate from the outside. I'd like a sense of the exterior seating. How many people can be out there at any one point? What are you anticipating? And I'd also like more information about your trash collection. That for later, not today.
And I think some more details about the deliveries would be helpful, sort of what you typically
Deliveries,
have
yeah.
for, I mean, we're talking about the truck traffic, so I mean, if it's 10 trucks a day, if it's 10 trucks a week, if it's 1 truck a week, you know, so giving us an idea of sort of what we're looking at, and maybe even, you know, what kind of trucks we're talking about for the different vendors that you typically have and what you would expect. I think that can give us some ideas about what, I mean, we're sort of in a good situation here because you run basically the existing business already, so I don't think we have to guess at a lot of this. So that kind of information I think would be really helpful for the traffic and specifically the trucks part of the traffic.
Great points.
Good.
I want a high five.
Oh, all right, great.
Couple more was the discussion about the fire lane, potential short-term parking in the fire lane.
Yep.
Solar, did I say?
Solar.
Solar,
Solar's
I
on
think
there.
one of the key elements with solar is we have section 7.3. And we started to look at this recently. I think one of the questions that is not really clear is on a site like this, for the power that would be associated with this particular use, whether we're talking about a decommissioning plan or a bond. So the solar bylaw was written for commercial solar in a field with a full-blown decommissioning plan. And so the way this seems to work is that even with your proposal, it's getting crammed into this ordinance. So let me just have you look at that and look at whether the
It's,
planning
and
board.
keep that, I mean, because I think our decommissioning plan generally is the idea, you know, we've been doing a lot of these, so it's a meadow that now becomes, you know, if it's not functioning, just an eyesore. And so the idea is the city at least has the right to go back and reclaim it and make a meadow.
Sure.
It's not really the same motivation here, so I don't know that the same concept applies, but we should make sure we're looking at I think we might be able to waive that, but I'm not
Let's
positive.
say that it's
So
a may.
okay,
The
so
planning
it's
board may
kind of
require
interesting. I think we should all
decommissioning,
give
right?
that some thought about whether
Blatant
that's,
avoidance.
yeah. Because frankly, it's arguably been a blighted parcel for a while as it is, and we don't require them to have a decommissioning bond for us to go in there and turn that back into.
They're doing that for you.
Right,
So
exactly.
can you just say something about when you continue that no other notices are sent out, that this is the notice?
Oh yeah, so just as a reminder to everybody, you know, once you get, if you're in a butter or if there's publication notice in the paper, you get the notice to come to the first hearing, and then the notice for the next hearing is when we make a motion right now to continue it to, in this case, probably February 19th. So you won't get any more abutters notice, you won't get necessarily something in the paper. There'll be a meeting agenda that we post generally, which is both at City Hall and on the website, right, Jeff?
Yep.
And so that's sort of the process. So make sure you're paying attention and talking to people if you want to come here and participate, because there won't necessarily be another outreach to people in the community.
The new information, we do make an attempt to post it online, so if the board continues to February 19th, the idea would be ideally on February 14th, which is a Thursday, the new information will be posted on the planning board's page for public review. And then 6 o'clock, is that what you were going to be talking about?
Yeah.
For this one? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I motion to continue the River Valley Co-op special permit to February 19th at 6 o'clock.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining? Okay, great. Thanks so much, folks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Planning board, real quick item. So under our rules, I'm not going to wait because I really want to go home too. Under our rules, in our first full January meeting, we're supposed to chair and vice chair, and I didn't I don't think we did that last year. So I don't have any objection to remaining. I would love to have Jim as a vice chair, but if anyone else is interested.
I make a motion
No,
that
no, no,
we
no, no, no.
leave
I
everything
think
the
it's,
same
it's
as it
not on the
was.
agenda yet, so I don't think we can make
Oh,
a decision
yeah.
here. We're
Right.
gonna put it on the agenda for the next meeting, but give it
Okay.
some thought. If anybody has aspirations of seizing control,
It'll be a fight.
Yeah.
All right.
I have aspirations for not being the chair of the planning.
That's right. All right. So
Motion to adjourn.
second.
That'll go on the agenda, of course.
We already had the motion to adjourn, didn't we?
All in favor?
Aye.
Now we
Get
do.
outta here.
Thank you.
All right.